Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Harry Potter was lived and trained by dragons? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original stories link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. Vernon Dursley thought himself to be a genius. He finally found a way to get rid of the freak that had been dumped on their doorstep. The freak had lived with them for 5 years now. And they weren't happy with it. His presence was endured because he did his chores and had become a fine cook. Vernon wouldn't admit that out loud even if his life depended on it, but still he and his wife agreed from the moment they had found the freak that if the opportunity came to pass they would get rid of the freak without a second thought. They hadn't been actively searching for ways to get the freak out of their house and out of their lives, but after the last stunt the freak had pulled, he just had to go. How dared he to turn his teacher's hair wig blue? Such freakish things weren't allowed, but no matter how Vernon tried to beat the freakishness out of him, but no matter how much Vernon tried, the freak didn't change. Grunnings, the drill-making company he worked for, had asked if he wanted to go to Romania for a business opportunity, an opportunity Vernon couldn't decline even before he got his grand idea. Petunia first wasn't sure about his idea, but after their precious Dudley had been put to bed they had talked about it, and when the sun was starting to rise she had agreed with his plan, but she still wasn't happy that he had to leave home for more than a week. The preparations had been made and his suitcase had been packed and was stowed in the trunk of his brand new super deluxe company car. Also in the back of his trunk wax a small wooden crate. The only reason it had been lifted with care into the car was because of the car, not of what the crate contained. With a happy tune from the radio, Vernon thought about the night before. The freak had made a meal fit for Thanksgiving and they had a lovely evening as a family. When it was time for the freak to clean up, Vernon had offered him a small plate of food, but only after he had cleaned up. The freak had nodded and silently went to work as quick as he could. What the freak didn't know was that the plate Vernon had prepared for him was laced with incredibly strong drugs that would put him down for hours, if not days. Vernon had worked it out with a large map that he used to write down the route he needed to take to get to Romania, and he had found a nice forest where he could drop of an unwanted crate without anyone knowing, and even if the freak was found he doubted it very much that he would ever find his way out of that forest or ever darken their doorstep again. It was a long drive, but that didn't matter to Vernon. He loved driving, and in his new car he felt as if he was the king of the world himself. A new car, a promotion on top of this amazing business deal, and as the sari of this pie of luck was that they got rid of the freak. Life couldn't be better in Vernon Dursley's humble opinion. It was more than a 26-hour drive and Vernon intended to drive it in on go. If he really needed it he could take a nap when he got gas or food. It wouldn't be the first time he had done something like that, so it wouldn't be a problem. He had planned it perfectly. After he had dropped off his unwanted load, he would have just a few hours left to drive before he arrived at his hotel, where he would sleep as long as he wanted, as his business meeting would be the next day. It was a little over 30 hours later that Vernon dropped a wooden crate with a loud bang next to his car. His amazing company car had driven him much further into the dark forest than he could have hoped for. He kicked against the crate. "You're still alive in there, freak." Grinning, he unlocked the crate but didn't open the lid. Instead he pushed it to the edge of a hill, and with a mighty groan he pushed the crate off the hill. Vernon laughed as he heard the sounds of the freak banging against the walls of the small wooden crate as the crate tumbled down the hill. He didn't stay and watch as it was already getting dark and he wanted the soft bed that was waiting for him a couple of hours away. Happily humming, he turned his car around, and before he had left the forest the freak had already been forgotten. *******. In a dark forest in Romania, a little wooden crate tumbled down a hill and launched itself at the bottom, where it fell apart in broken pieces and sharp splinters. A small dark-haired boy rolled out of the broken crate and landed on his back. No matter the tumble of the fall, no sound came from the boy as he was thrown around like a rag doll. It was hours and hours later before a soft moaning sound could be heard and small limbs started moving. "Ah!" The boy moaned softly, and inch by inch he tried to get himself upright, but soon noticed that his leg was broken. He didn't need to be a doctor to see that, as he clearly saw some bone poking through his flesh. The boy swallowed as he felt nauseous as he looked at his leg. He decided to see what else was wrong with him, so he lifted his arms, and even though they felt bruised and hurt like hell when he lifted them, but besides some scratches and cuts his arms weren't really hurt. When he was done inspecting his body, that wasn't hurt much beyond his broken leg. The little boy shivered in the thin rags that once upon a time had been clothes from his cousin Dudley. He looked around, and not far from him lay a stick, and with a small smile the boy tried to get to the stick so he could use it to walk, no matter what he needed to find his way to get out of this forest. He had no idea how long it took before he managed to crawl the 6 feet that separated him from the stick. With a cry of relief he held the stick close to his chest as if it was his lifeline, but then came the hard task of lifting himself off the ground and try to walk with his broken leg. He had ripped a part of the huge shirt he had been wearing and had wrapped it around the open wound of his leg. For the first time in his short life he was happy that there was no food inside his stomach, as he felt sick and the darkness tried to take him. Again, with much pain and tears, he had wrapped his legs as best as he could. The only thing to do now was to stand up and get out of this forest. A little wobbly, the small boy stood on one leg with both hands firmly on his stick. He looked around and he had no clue which way he needed to go. There was no way he was able to climb the hill, so instead he decided to follow the sound of water. He had become thirsty and he needed some sort of plan. In the next hours the little boy managed to get his way towards a small stream of water, and even though he was shivering from the cold in his thin clothes, sweat streamed down his pale face. He fell down on the wet stones at the shore of the stream, and with huge gulps he swallowed the cold, fresh water. He slowly lifted his broken leg off the ground and laid it into the cold stream. The pain shot through him like a hot dagger, and the darkness took him while he dropped unconscious on the wet shore of the small stream with his leg still in the water. What the boy didn't know was that something had been watching him from the moment the crate had been pulled out of the car. Deep red eyes had followed the tumble of the crate. Curious and were more than surprised when a boy had flown from the crate but stayed hidden, as it didn't trust humans. It had watched as the boy struggled and had admired its strength and determination, and was relieved when it finally reached the stream he had been aiming for and drank before passing out. When the boy didn't move and the red eyes saw how his breathing slowed down and his skin turned pale, it decided to take a closer look. Slowly, without making twigs snap or leaves shudder, stepped out of the shadows. It carefully expanded its huge wings and stretched itself before slowly making its way towards the little boy. It lifted its giant head and sniffed and gave a little push with its snout, but besides a groan the boy didn't move and stayed unconscious. She pushed again, and suddenly the boy's eyes flew open and emerald green eyes looked into deep red eyes. For a moment it looked as if the boy tried to lift his arm to pet the snout that had been pushing him before his arm fell down next to him. "I'm sorry," he mumbled before he lost consciousness again. The deep red eyes looked concerned, and then it shook its head before it oh so gently lifted the boy from the ground with its front paw. The little boy disappeared inside the giant claw. It spread its huge wings, and with a couple of beats of his wings it took off with the little boy. There underneath the moon a huge, red-eyed Ukrainian ironbelly decided that from this day on this unwanted boy, dumped as garbage, would be her hatchling, and he was as precocious to her as all her other hatchlings, and she would like to meet the person, creature or animal that ever tried to hurt her hatchling ever again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. When the boy woke he almost screamed. As he opened his eyes and looked around he suddenly realized that a huge dragon was holding him in between its paws. How was this possible? Dragons weren't real, but he read enough stories in the library to recognize the winged creature that was watching him with red eyes. But before he could truly panic or injure his broken leg any further he heard a soft voice. "Hush now, little hatchling, don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. I tried to heal your wounds, but even with my magic it will take time for your leg to heal completely." The boy looked down and saw that his leg was as good as new. The bone that had peaked trough was back where it belonged and the skin was knitted back together. It was still painful and sore, but his leg wasn't broken anymore. When he inspected his arms he saw that his cuts and bruises were all healed. If he was honest with himself, besides his leg his body felt better than he could remember it done. "Thank you, but why did you help me? How is it possible that I can understand you, and are you a real dragon or am I dreaming?" The little boy rambled, confused and a little bit in shock. If he hadn't been in such a state he would never have dared to ask questions. That was something he had learned a long time ago. "I have to be dreaming. Only freaks would dream of speaking dragons and magic." The dragon snorted and the boy looked confused as he realized the dragon had been laughing at him. "Oh hatchling, you are a speaker. That's why you are able to understand me. Magic is real and so are dragons, as you can see for yourself. As for helping you, I am a mother and no real mother would ever leave a child in need of help," the dragon said, as if that explained it all. And for any true mother it did explain it all, but for an orphan boy that had been hated by his relatives it was a strange concept. The boy looked sad and some tears escaped even though he tried to hold them back. Of course it had been too good to be true. I'm not a child, I'm a freak. I don't deserve care or food and clothing. The dragon roared angry and the boy tried to scramble away. Those horrible two-legged bastards. I should flame them before feeding them to my next clutch of hatchlings. She bent down her long neck and made sure she looked into the boy's eyes. You are a child, and you are my hatchling. I will take care of you and protect you. Nobody is ever going to hurt you, that I promise. The little boy nodded but still wasn't sure. He couldn't believe it, but as long as this dragon wanted him he would stay. Nobody had ever wanted him before and he liked it. Are you hungry, little hatchling? The boy nodded. Yes, but if you show me the kitchen I can make breakfast. I'm a really good cook. The dragon laughed and it galmed through the cave. You're funny little hatchling. We don't have a kitchen or a store. You need to learn to live off the forest. I can take care of the meat but I don't think you like it the way I roast it. The little boy paled a little but nodded determined. He could learn to live off the forest. He had learned to cook, do the laundry, his numbers and how to read mostly by himself. He could do this. I can learn how to live off the forest. I like to learn, the boy said confident. Do you have a name? The dragon almost smiled. You will learn everything I know. My name translated to your language would mean something like Silver-Winged Hunter of the Night. Wow, that is a really long name. I'm boy, or freak, but when I got to school I learned my real name is Harry. For a moment it looked as if the dragon was going to spit fire, but after a deep breath she said, I will call you Harry if that is what you like. You are my hatchling and you deserve to be as happy with your name as I am with mine. The boy shrugged shyly. I like Harry, just Harry. I don't need a name as long as yours. The dragon nodded. Harry it is. You may call me Ruby as that is a name a human gave me a long time ago. It was because of my eyes. Or you can call me Mother, as all my hatchlings do. The little boy, now Harry, smiled and shyly said, I really like to have a real mom. This time Harry was sure that the dragon now his mom smiled. He could see the change in her eyes. Well, let's go out for your first lesson. I already caught you a rabbit. Now it's time you learn how to prepare and cook it on a fire outside. That day Harry learned how to make a knife, build a campfire, skin a rabbit and cook it, and when he went to sleep that night he felt happy. He had a new mom and it didn't matter that she was a giant dragon, and for the first time in as long as he could remember he had eaten more than ever. He fell asleep next to his mom who cuddled him in a large wing to keep him warm and safe. In the next few weeks Harry learned his way around the cave that his mother and now he lived in. It was a 5-minute walk from the mountain through the little valley down to the river where he got his water to drink, cook and wash. He was there mostly alone with his mother, but from time to time another dragon landed in the valley. Some were her hatchlings. And others were friends. All had been amazed with the little boy and couldn't believe what his mother had done. But at the end each and every dragon loved him and had promised to visit again. When Harry had been dropped off, it had been spring and the forest was coming back alive after a cold winter. Ruby had warned him that even though it was many moons away he should start preparing for the winter. He had started a little garden and Ruby knew surprisingly a lot about all the plants, fruits and herbs that grew in their forest. He had transferred a couple of small apple trees he had found along with some bushes that would be full with blackberries. He was glad he didn't need to hunt for himself as Ruby took care of that. He had learned to clean the hides of the animals Ruby brought home, and he already had multiple large furs to keep him warm. He also learned how to make leather. He also learned how to let his magic help him with his daily tasks. He was still amazed with all the knowledge Ruby had, and even though she had promised him he couldn't believe he would learn it all. Hard work was nothing new to him, but that his hard work was just for him definitely was. He woke with the sounds of the birds, and while he did his morning business his mother took off for her morning flight. He started his fire and warmed up some water for tea. He still smiled as he remembered how happy he was when he found a mint plant. He loved it fresh but didn't mind if the mint was dried first, so he planted a lot of mint plants and had started drying them. He would be happy when it was cold and he had a cup of mint tea to warm his insides. Slowly but steadily his meals got more varied as he found wild potatoes and carrots, and he soon realized that there was more than he could ever eat. The only thing he needed to do was make sure he had enough to last him through the winter, and he had no clue how much he needed, so he made sure that from each animal Ruby haunted he smoke dried some for the winter, and nothing went to waste of that he made sure. A life had been given, and that was precious, and that was something he knew before his mother told him. Happily whistling as he walked past the river in search of anything he could use or eat, he wasn't really paying any attention to his surroundings, and he suddenly walked into the soft and fluffy arms of a huge brown bear. He paled and scrambled backwards, but his feet slipped over a slippery rock, and with a splash he fell back half into the river. Loud splashing, he kept moving backwards as the bear roared angry and swiped away with its paw. Harry screamed. At the sound of his screaming, the bear slowed down a little bit while Harry still moved backwards. He didn't dare to turn his back to the angry bear. The bear roared again and started to charge forwards. Harry screamed again and did his best to get back to his feet. Not long before the sharp white teeth of the bear would rip him apart, Harry heard the flapping of giant wings, and when his mother landed in front of him, and with one sweep of her paw she swatted the bear away as if it was nothing more than a fly that bothered her. "Harry, hatchling, are you all right? I came as quickly as I could. I swear my heart stopped beating when I saw that bear charging at you." Harry had wrapped both arms around her snout. "I was so scared, but I knew you would save me." "Always, little one. You're sure you are not hurt?" "Nah, I'm all right, just a couple of bruises." When he let go of his mom, he looked sadly at the brown bear, and the weird way its neck was bent, he knew that it was dead. "Can you take it home? I would like to save the fur at least." "That will be no problem," Ruby answered softly. Harry nodded in appreciation as he inspected the body, and then he saw movement from the order of his eyes. The leaves of the bush were moving more than they should, and that's when he saw two brown eyes with small brown ears peeking through the bushes. Oh, she was a mom. She was just protecting her baby. "So did I? I know, but her baby is all alone now," Harry said sadly, and before he could help himself he walked towards the bushes while he ruffled through his bag, and with a piece of apple on the palm of his hand he reached out to the cub. To his surprise, it took no time at all before the cub left the bushes and started sniffing at the apple, and Harry could pet him. Harry just thought that the cub was just fearless when it approached them without fear, and even with a dragon not far away, but it was his magic that invited the cub out of its hiding place. It was the calming magic that surrounded the boy that made the cub believe he would be safe with these strange beings, and his instincts told him to hide, but the magic that whispered inside his heart made him do otherwise. "Can we keep him?" Harry asked hopefully. Ruby sighed as far as a dragon could sigh. "It is going to be a lot of work to take care of a bear cub. At the looks of it was one of his real first walks out of its den, but I wonder where is the second cub?" She looked around before she saw the opening of a cave and took a deep sniff. "Well, it seems as if you have gained not one, not two, but 4 cubs, little hatchling," she said laughing. "F4? Harry stuttered. He walked closer to the entrance with the cub in his arms, and when he looked inside the cave 3 cubs welcomed him inside. He sat down, and within seconds he had the other cubs over his little body, and while he hugged the cubs he knew he could never leave them alone. They would die in just a couple of days. "Mom, I think we are going to store a lot more food." His mom laughed, and while he slowly made his way back to his valley and their cave with 4 bear cubs in tow, Ruby moved the dead body of the brown bear back home. If you would ever ask Harry how he survived his first couple of days with the bear cubs, his answer would be that he had no idea. His first problem had been that he had no milk for the little cubs, and that's when Ruby told him that the cubs could eat grain, meat and vegetables he had as long as it was made into a mush. They would learn to eat it soon enough. The cubs were hungry almost all the time. They followed him around as little shadows. The names he gave the cubs were the best names an almost 7-year-old boy, raised in his circumstances, could come up with. The cub he had found first got the name Teddy, as he had always wished to have a teddy bear just like Dudley to cuddle with. The second cub got the name Shadow, as the little bear cub was a couple of shades darker than his siblings. He didn't like to bathe in the sun like his siblings. The third cub got his name due to his love to hunt little prey like mice, rabbits and other rodents, and was named Hunter. And last but definitely not least was Tiny, the smallest cub. She was the only female, and even though all the cubs stayed close, Tiny was always in touching distance and loved to be carried around. Slowly the days were starting to get shorter and the air became colder, and Harry started to worry that he did not have enough in storage, so in the last weeks of the fall he almost managed to double his supply. His cubs had grown, but he could still pick them up and carry them if he wanted to, and he loved them with all his heart, and he was grateful and incredibly happy for their company, as he felt less lonely with them always at his side. So when the winter came and the valley was covered in a layer of snow and he could barely take a step outside, he was more than happy with his family. The cub slept a lot but loved to play and cuddle while his mother told stories and taught him all about magic. When the leaves finally started to grow back on the trees and spring finally showed her face, Harry decided that it was time for a feast. They had more than enough left from the winter, and with the world coming alive again, food would be soon more than plenty. The 4 cubs had grown way bigger than any other brown bear their age. For most bear cubs winter meant hunger, but for the 4 that had been living with Harry and his mother never knew hunger or cold, and with not only food but magic to help them grow, they had become much larger and way smarter than any ordinary brown bear could have ever been. But still they had a long way to go before they were adults. "Mom, can you go look for a deer today? I'm going to make stew," Harry asked while he was rummaging through his bags filled with ingredients. "That won't be a problem. I saw a herd not far away, so getting one should not be that hard." "That is great. Also the bees have all left the hive, so it's when the stew is hanging above the fire I'm going back to collect the honey. Make sure all the bees are gone." Harry grimaced. He remembered all too well how much a bee could sting. "I will," he said before he waved her off. As he collected all the things he needed for his stew and laid them on his workbench next to the fire pit, he couldn't help but grin. He had come a long way from his first campfire. He had now a small kitchen where he could cook. He had still a big fire with a pot hanging above it, but he had also built himself a stone oven. Everything had been covered with leaves and the sides had wooden walls. It had been a long and painful job, and only the strength and the knowledge Ruby held that they had accomplished to make the small kitchen attached to the cave. Harry had never survived the winter without his kitchen. It kept the entrance dry and warm, and making meals in the long dark days had been a perfect way to pass the time. In the long winter he had learned so many things. One of them was making storage boxes out of wood, and his next project would be a small storage chamber where he could keep all his wooden boxes neatly sorted, and he loved it when all his things were neatly stored away. He could blindly find his things as he always belonged. The winter had been good for one reason only, and that was all the free time he had to make things. "Do any of you want to come with me while I check the traps for rabbits?" he asked the sleeping bears. After his mom had told him that he shouldn't forget the language he grew up with, he had started talking in English with his cubs, not that it really mattered to the bears. Shadow walked outside the cave and took one look at the bright shining sun before he moved back inside. Hunter and Teddy were cuddled together on a warm stone sleeping in the sun. Teddy just yawned before he turned on his back using his brother as a pillow. "All right, sleepyheads," Harry laughed. "Sometimes I wonder why I even ask. Come on Tiny, my life would have been lonely without you." The large light brown bear budged her head against him and he scratched her behind her ears. When he turned back a few hours later with Tiny at his side, he was loaded with not only 6 rabbits but 4 stomachs filled with honey. At first he had been disgusted at the idea of storing his liquids like water and broth in the stomach of an animal like a deer, but then his mother had explained how it would be a waterproof bag after he cleaned it and prepped it the way she told him. He had failed more than one time. The same counted for his furs and pelts, but trough failure he had learned, and at the end of the winter he felt confident enough to work on the bear pelt that once belonged to the mother of his cubs. It still held her head and he wanted it to last forever, as she deserved so much more, but she had died protecting her cubs. She would keep them warm for many winters to come. As he hung the rabbits on the drying rack, his mother came back with the deer. Happily whistling, he took the deer to the back to be skinned and prepared. They could eat for a week, and he was already smiling at the thought of stew they would have. ****** Chapter 2. Chapter notes. Enjoy the second chapter of this story on my birthday. Partying face. Please let me know what you all think of the first 2 chapters so I know that not only my imaginary friends enjoy my writings. Rolling on the floor laughing. As always, big hug, smiling face with open hands, LadyRava. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 2. Harry was happily sousing at the shore of the river while he used the soft and fluffy tummy of Tiny as a pillow. Teddy and Hunter were both swimming lazy around not far offshore. Shadow had decided to stay in the cool surroundings of the cave. If you asked anyone the date, they would tell you that it was the 31st of July, and with a confused look they would tell you it was 1991. This meant that the boy snoozing on the shore was 11 years old as of today, but if you would ask Harry, he would tell you that it was a hot summer and that he had no clue of what his age was or whatever his birthday was, or for that matter what day of the week it was. For Harry it was the middle of summer, bloody hot, and he had more than plenty of time to prepare and stock for the winter. So when the peace was suddenly interrupted when 3 dragons landed next to Harry loudly roaring, Harry jumped to his feet in shock while the dragons Harry now recognized as his mother's older hatchlings. Humans are approaching. Harry paled. Never in all his years living here had humans ever come close to their part of the valley. He had learned a long time ago that he lived at the Dragon Reserve in Romania and that there were people not that far away, but from the moment his mother had brought him back home the valley had been off limits for any humans. They weren't even allowed to fly over the valley on their broomsticks. It had taken more than one injured dragon handler before they had learned their lesson and didn't come too close to Ruby's Valley as Harry called it. His mother landed next to him and her daughters. How far are they? They don't move fast, it will take them at least 2 hours. Ruby nodded and thought for a moment. Let them come closer as long as they don't form a threat we will let them in but we don't let them near the cave. Harry, you take the cubs and go home. Harry nodded and scrambled around to get his stuff and make his way back. He felt horrible and he was scared. Why were the humans in their valley after all this time? What did they want? He was scared and he feared for the safety of his family. He hated this feeling. It had been such a lovely day, it had been a break from his daily hard work. Why did they have to ruin it all? Sweating heavily he came back to the cave where he took a mug and filled it with cold water and sat down at the entrance of the cave. He could see everything but people would have a hard time seeing him as the cave was nicely hidden. The sky had filled itself with Ruby's offspring and dozens of large Ukrainian ironbellies circled around the valley and when a large group of humans entered the other side of the valley his mother landed next to him. The humans won't let themselves be scared away. We tried everything without hurting them but if they come closer we have no other choice. Harry nodded worriedly. Please don't get hurt. His cubs stayed close. Not that you could call them cubs anymore as they were fully grown adult bears and with the magic and excellent food they had grown up with they were way larger than any of their kin. With Tiny's head on his lap he watched as a large group of humans walked out of the forest and into their valley. The dragons roared and spit fire at the group but some sort of protective dome surrounded the group of people so they stayed unharmed as they slowly made their way forwards into the valley. When the group arrived in the middle of the valley one of Ruby's daughters had enough and dived towards the groups and started sweeping at them with her large tail while throwing a large beam of fire at them. Then as one the group raised their arms and in their hands they were holding sticks and out of nowhere jets of red lights were fired off at the dragon who got hit in the middle of her chest by dozens of red lights before she dropped down. Suddenly the whole valley was in chaos as dozens of dragons dove down spitting fire and trying to rip the protective dome surrounding the group apart. Ruby landed next to her daughter to protect her and attacked the group of humans. Again the group raised their arms and shot red light. No! Harry yelled as he saw how his mother was hit by multiple red lights. He saw her waver but she didn't fall. Harry stormed down towards his mother with 4 huge bears running next to him. The humans had stopped moving when they heard his desperate yell and looked stunned as they saw a bewildered child with shoulder-long messy black hair, dressed in pelts and 4 adult brown bears bigger than they had ever seen running towards them. Panting heavily Harry stopped in front of his mother and stood protectively next to her while the cubs stood half beside and half in front of him. Behind him a couple of dragons landed next to the unconscious Ironbelly. What do you humans want? Harry asked angry. They had not only attacked Ruby's daughter but they had tried to do the same with his mother. They had crossed a line when they had attacked his family and he wasn't going to be friendly with humans who attacked his family. An old man with a long white beard, dressed in a long dress or something that was colored night blue with orange stripes they looked hideous stepped forward but stayed inside the protective dome. My name is Albus Dumbledore and we are looking for Harry Potter. We have a letter addressed to him. Harry raised his eyebrow and crossed his arms while he looked over the group of humans. My name is Harry, don't know about the Potter part or any letters. Albus Dumbledore smiled happily while he shushed the excited murmurs of the people behind him. Well Harry, my dear boy, we are happy to have found you. He pulled out a parchment envelope and with a lot of effort Harry finally read. Harry J. Potter. Ruby's Valley, Dragon Reserve of Romania. What does it say? Harry asked, not making any move to take the letter Albus owed him. Well, if you took the letter and read it for yourself. I'm not that good at reading so tell me or leave, you have done enough damage, Harry snapped. We don't mean any harm, we just stunned the dragon, it will wake up and will be perfectly fine. Albus Dumbledore explained with a friendly voice but Harry wasn't having it. You attacked my family. Albus Dumbledore decided to ignore that last comment or the growling bears or the still roaring dragons. We have come to invite you to Hogwarts Wizarding School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, to learn the finest art of magic our world has to offer. Yeah, not interested, so I suggest you leave. But. Albus Dumbledore stumbled over his words. Not ever in all his years as a teacher or as headmaster had anyone refused the offer to attend Hogwarts. I think you are confused, my boy. At Hogwarts you can learn magic. At Hogwarts you have a home. Harry laughed. Yeah, as I said, I'm not interested. I know more about magic than I could ever learn at your school. I have a family and this is my home. As I suggested before, it is time for you all to leave. You have proved that you can take out one dragon, but I'm willing to bet my best butcher knife on it that you can't take them all, and that's not including my cubs. He pointed at the growling bears and then at the dragons that had landed behind them and were slowly surrounding them. Albus Dumbledore paled as he saw how they were being surrounded by a herd of angry dragons, and with a sad shake of his head he said, "We meant no harm. We will be leaving now, but I hope to come back tomorrow so we can talk." Harry ignored the man as he turned his back towards the group of humans, and his attention was on the slowly awakening dragon, and behind his back the group of humans were pushed out of the valley way faster than they had managed to enter. Asterisk. This is a disaster. Minerva McGonagall moaned the moment they were back at the reserve and sat down at the table. We can fix this, that I'm sure of, Albus Dumbledore said calmly while he poured them all a cup of tea. We have 1 month to convince the boy that his place is at Hogwarts. How did you not know you had a child living at your reserve? A tall man with half-long greasy black hair and a hooked nose snapped at the director of the reserve. I told you, years ago the dragons refused to let us go near that valley. We tried, but after we had multiple men with injuries we let it go, as no trouble seems to come from there. You don't just walk into a dragon's den. Today they could have killed us all without any effort. They let us in. The director snapped back. Alex had been the director of the Romanian Reserve for many years, and they all knew that a dragon did what he wanted and nothing could stop them, so if the dragon didn't want them in their valley then they stayed out of said valley. The reserve was to protect, care and learn from the dragons, not stress them out or stun them whenever they felt like it. Lots of trust they had been building with the dragons had been washed down the drain after today. Years and years of building trust, poof, gone because Albus Bloody Dumbledore had said they had no time to waste and had marched in as if he owned the place. Thank you, Alexander, your help is much appreciated. Albus Dumbledore said, I'm afraid we will have to bother you for a little longer as we convince Harry that his home is at Hogwarts. Alex grumbled something incomprehensible. I didn't help you, you forced my hand. Before he left the room at the door stood a reed head waiting for him. Charlie, take your broom and get a look at the valley. Make sure the peace has returned and that Ironbelly is back up in the air. Get as close as you can, but don't take risks. Will do, boss. Charlie said before he walked off to get his broom. He had just started working at the reserve after he had graduated from Hogwarts, and he could never have imagined that he would see his old headmaster and professors at his new job in an entirely different country. He had loved dragons for as long as he could remember, and if you asked him Mom, she would tell you that his first word had been Dago, while pointing at a picture of a dragon. Charlie mounted his broom and took off towards Ruby's Valley, as they called it now after seeing the name on the letter. It wasn't really a long flight. In just 20 minutes he could see the hills and the end of the forest leading to the valley. He was a little surprised when none of the dragons stopped him from going any further as they normally would when he traveled in this direction. They just watched him as he flew by. He started to get a little nervous when he reached Ruby's Valley. He knew his boss had told him not to take any risks, but none of the dragons had told him to turn around. He slowed down his speed and made sure that he didn't look like a threat, and that's when he saw that the whole valley had been filled with dragons, and when he looked closer he saw that they were all children of Ruby. Charlie frowned, confused. He had never heard of a dragon family meeting, where they were all here because of what happened earlier. He slowly flew closer to get a better look. If the dragons didn't want him there, they would have chased him away faster than he could fly. In the middle of the valley he spotted the 4 huge brown bears. He didn't spot the boy until he almost flew above him. The stunned dragon was fully awake but hadn't moved from the spot she had fallen, and the boy they had identified as Harry moved over and around her. As far as Charlie could tell, Harry was looking for any injuries or wounds. To Charlie's shock, he even kind of walked into her mouth and checked the sharp pointed teeth. All the dragon had to do was close her mouth and nothing would be left of the small boy. After that Harry let her spread her wings one at a time and he inspected them closely. He stepped aside so the dragon could stand, and with just a couple of flaps of her wings she rose into the air, and with a loud roar she flew high up in the air, circled around the valley before landing next to the boy again. Charlie saw him smile and then hug the snout of the large dragon before he turned around and looked up at Charlie and stared straight in the eyes. Charlie gulped, and in his shock the broom dropped a couple of feet before he pulled his broom back up. "What do you want?" Harry called out. "Haven't you done enough?" "I'm sorry." Charlie called back. "We never meant any harm to the dragons. Those people you saw earlier refused to listen. We couldn't stop them, as the man you spoke with is a man that holds a lot of power in our world." Harry nodded. "Are they gone now?" Charlie shook his head. "No, they refused to leave." "Why?" "They want you to go back with them to attend Hogwarts." "I'm not going. This is my home." Harry answered back while he scratched between the ears of one of the bears. Charlie sighs. "Yeah, they're not going to accept that." "Why?" Harry asked again. "You are too important to them." Harry laughed. "I'm just Harry. I wasn't important when I was left on a doorstep in the middle of the night. I wasn't important when my uncle dumped me like garbage in a forest in an entirely different country." Charlie paled, but Harry went on. "I wasn't important when I almost died. If it wasn't for my mother I would have died that night. My uncle dumped me. She protected me, healed me and taught me everything I needed to know to survive." "Mother?" was the only thing Charlie could say. He knew, just as everyone in the wizarding world, that Harry Potter was an orphan. His mother had died. Harry nodded and pointed with a loving smile at the largest dragon that had stood by his side from the start. "Ruby is my mother. She has a different name, but humans called her Ruby once upon a time, and it's easier to say." The huge dragon bent her long neck and nuzzled the boy with her snout. Harry laughed, kissed her snout and looked back up at Charlie. "A dragon, an Ukrainian ironbelly, is your mother?" Charlie repeated, stunned. Harry, note the best mom ever. Then Charlie burst out laughing. It took all his strength to keep his broom in the air while he laughed. Harry frowned. "That's not really nice to laugh in my face." I'm sorry." Charlie laughed. "But if you knew what I know, then you would laugh too." Harry squinted his eyes. "I still don't like being laughed at. Perhaps it's time for you to fly back." Charlie took a deep breath to calm himself. "If you allow me to land so we can talk, I will try my best to explain things to you." It took a couple of minutes, but finally Harry nodded his head. "You may land, but if you hurt anyone in my family you won't make it back alive." Charlie nodded. "I promise you I won't hurt anyone. I just want to talk." "Come along then. I could use a drink and I've already skipped breakfast, so I could use some food," Harry said before he started walking. Charlie landed as quick as he could without being too quick and made the dragons think he was a threat, and followed Harry on a small path leading up the hill. When he saw the entrance of the cave and the additions built next to it, he was amazed. How was such a young boy, a child, capable of building this? "Sit down," Harry said as he pointed towards some large builders that had been covered with fur. "Do you want anything to drink?" "I have water, milk and mint tea." Charlie was still amazed and he couldn't help but ask, "Milk?" Harry laughed. "Yeah, we got Bella not long after I found the cubs. Even though I knew that they had everything they needed, but still babies need milk, or that is my opinion, and even though Mom did not agree, she still got me a cow." "Your mom, who is a dragon, got you a cow?" Charlie repeated, disbelieving. "Yup. It cost me most of the leather I had at the time, but simply put, with my magic we put the cow to sleep, put her in the leather straps I had made, and Mom brought her back home." At that answer Charlie couldn't help but laugh. "You are an amazing kid, you know that, right?" Harry blushed a little. "I'm just Harry." Charlie smiled. "Well Harry, you were awesome, believe me. And I would love some milk if you have some. I don't think I ever had a glass of milk from a cow that has flown with a dragon." Harry grinned back. "Not only flew with a dragon but loves to sleep next to a bear." Charlie laughed and Harry went to his kitchen to pour the drinks. He also took some of the honey cookies he had made the day before and took a quick look in the small stable that held Bella the cow and a couple of chickens, but they still had everything they needed. When he finally sat down next to Charlie with Tiny laying behind his back so he had something soft and comfortable to lean on, was it that Charlie started to explain who he was to the wizarding world, how he had defeated the Dark Lord and ended the war, how he had become a symbol of light in the past 10 years. "But if I'm that important, Why did they leave me in the middle of the night on a doorstep with people who didn't want me? Harry asked, confused. Charlie shrugged. I don't know. We have been told you were raised away from the public to give you a normal childhood as much as possible. We are told that you were safe and happy. Harry snorted. The one who told you that is a liar. Charlie frowned. The one who told that to the wizarding world is Albus Dumbledore, the man you spoke to. The one with the long beard and ugly dress. Charlie laughed. Yeah, that's him, and he was not wearing a dress but robes. Harry laughed. I'm glad I'm not going to that school. I'm not wearing a dress and definitely not one so ugly. Charlie laughed. Dumbledore is famous for a lot of things but not for his good taste in clothes. Suddenly Harry turned serious. What are you going to tell them when you get back? Charlie thought for a moment before he said, What do you want me to tell them? Nothing. Harry laughed. After everything we talked about, I'm not sure my mom will let them in the valley if they try again. Charlie nodded in understanding. I would like to tell my boss about you. You know you have a real gift, one we can use at the reserve. What do you mean? Charlie laughed. Oh kid, you can what everyone who work with dragons dreams of. You can speak with dragon. They could tell us how we can take the best care of them. They could let us know when something is wrong, and then I'm not even talking about what amazing stories they have to tell, the history. Well, if you put it that way. Harry laughed. But the dragons already know that they can find me if something is wrong. It's only the big things I can't heal, like the broken wing last summer. We have been wondering for some time why we didn't have any dragons with things like splinters in their paws or bones stuck in between their teeth. Harry shrugged. Yeah, they come to me for those things. It's an easy fix and doesn't take much time. They know that if they are really hurt or sick they have to find your people. Yeah, but when they come to us we have no way to calm them down. We have to put them to sleep, something that distresses them very much, and it always breaks some of the trust we have been building with them. You could tell them what we are doing and that we don't mean any harm. Charlie sounded so excited and happy that Harry couldn't help but smile. I don't mind helping, but wouldn't you boss have a problem with me living here? Charlie shook his head. Not when he sees what you can do for himself. With your help we can change the future for dragons. Harry looked up at his mother, who lay not far away listening to their conversation. She gave a slight nod. You can tell your boss, but not those others who want me to go to Hogsmeade. Charlie laughed. Hogwarts. Yeah, whatever. Harry waved with his hand. Only your boss, you have to promise. Charlie nodded in agreement. I promise. And with that magic sealed their promise, much to Charlie's surprise and Harry's satisfaction. Well, it's getting late and I have a lot to do before it gets dark, Harry said while he stood up. With that, Charlie knew it was time for him to go, and he couldn't wait to see the face of his boss when he told him about Harry. As Charlie flew back, he suddenly remembered a story his mother had told him when he was young. It was one of his favorites while growing up because it had dragons in it. It was a story that was for some a fairy tale, while for others it was a prophecy, one they wished came true. It was a legend from the time of Merlin. Every child in the wizarding world had grown up with it, and as he flew back he heard his mother finishing the story. And when the child of the dragons is found, it will be the start of a change the world hasn't seen in ages. The dragons will return to our lands, and with them the long-lost ruler of the magical world, and where the world was once broken and divided will be healed and united by the strong, just and healing hand of the Dragon King. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I'm sorry, Mom, Harry said while he hugged the dragon's snout. What for? Ruby asked, confused. Harry sighs. This would have been the summer that you wanted to hatch a clutch of eggs, and I know that you won't leave me alone with all these strangers coming to our valley. Oh little one, there is always next year or the year after that. It doesn't matter, and you have nothing to be guilty of. Yeah, but without me, Harry started but was abruptly cut off. Without you I would have become a grumpy, old and lonely dragon with a boring life. I love you, Mom, Harry said while he gave her another hug. I love you too, Ruby said lovingly. When Harry let go he felt much better, and with a little smile he made sure everything had been done for the night before he lay next to Tiny. The other bears had decided to sleep outside as it was still incredibly warm, but no matter how hot it was, Harry always slept with Tiny as his pillow, soothing his dreams. When Harry woke the next morning, it was because of his mom warning him that the humans from the day before had entered the valley. Yawning, he wrapped a thin deer hide arohe, made his way down. What do you want? He asked, still yawning. This time it was only Dumbledore, a greasy black-haired man who looked as happy as Harry was, and Charlie, who had a frown on his face. Good morning, Harry, my boy. I was hoping you have a moment of your time so we could talk. Yeah, not interested. I haven't had my morning cup of tea. Bella needs to be milked, and don't let me get started about how grumpy the cubs are going to be when they are not getting their breakfast. As a response, 4 bears roared loudly and Tiny swatted playfully with her paw, which made Dumbledore take a step back. I hate to keep anyone from their breakfast, he said with a friendly smile, and his twinkle was back in his eyes. But I really need to talk to you. All I want is to explain a few things to you, and then you will happily come with us to Hogwarts. Harry yawned again and rolled his eyes. I told you I'm not interested in what you have to say, and there is no way I'm leaving my home or family. It is time for you to leave. He turned his back towards the 2 wizards and started walking across towards the cave. Albus Dumbledore wasn't used to this kind of treatment, so he got a little annoyed and tried to grab the boy's arm. Now listen, boy. That was as far as he could get before he was pushed away by a large brown bear, and when he scrambled back to his feet, he realized that a huge dragon towered over him. She looked more than pissed at the man, and with one short snort she burned his long with beard down to a crisp before she let the old man be helped to his feet by the other. Multiple other dragons had landed, and it was then that Dumbledore decided that it was a good time to return to the reserve. That was the first time, but definitely not the last time, that the long white beard of the headmaster was burned away. Lucky for Dumbledore, he had a potions master with him, and a hair grow potion was easily brewed. Asterisk 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 chapter end notes. No promises about when the next chapter is posted, but I try my best to post it next week. Open mouth smile. Chapter 3. Chapter notes. I hope you all enjoy this newest chapter, and I wish you all happy reading. Open book. To ease everyone's fears, I will finish this story. I just have no idea how long it's going to take me, as I have a feeling that this story is going to be longer than I first thought. Cold sweat smile. Happy reading, and let me know if you still enjoy reading this story, as your comments and kudos give the positive boost that makes me want to write more. Smile. Big hug smiling face with open hands. LadyRava. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 3. Harry looked up. He was just putting some hay down for Bella. He had just milked her when he heard Charlie shouting for him. A little concerned, he walked outside and saw Charlie land next to Teddy, who had been snoozing in front of the entrance of the cave. Harry, we got a young Chinese Firebolt with a broken wing. She was brought in yesterday. We healed it as best as we could, but you know how it is with wings. They need to rest for at least a week, or there is a big chance it will break again. So when she woke up this morning, she was far from happy. We tried stunning her again, but she is too far in her panic. She will hurt herself further. Charlie explained quickly while he was panting. Harry nodded in understanding. This was what they had spoken about. Now came his job. He needed to speak and try to calm the angry, confused and in pain dragon. They had agreed that if Harry was really needed they could get him, but he didn't want anything to do with the people that still tried to convince him to go for Hogwarts, or any humans for that matter, as he didn't trust them. He slowly started to trust Charlie, but they still had a long way to go building that trust into something strong and unbreakable. This would be the first time he would heal a dragon, or any animal for that matter, outside the valley. All right, I come with you. Harry quickly agreed before he took the bag he used for his healing, and whistled loudly, and in seconds Ruby landed next to the cave. Mom, the humans need us. There's a Chinese Firebolt really hurt, so we need to go and see if we can help her. Ruby knew her son, and she knew he would always help when he was able. Even if he wasn't, he still tried. She also knew that she wouldn't let her son go alone, so she bends down, and in no time she had not only Harry but also 2 brown bears on her back, and she was glad that the bears had stopped growing, otherwise they would have become too big and heavy for her to carry alone. Fly ahead, we will follow, Harry said from the back of his mother, who had already turned around and was ready to leave. Charlie looked thunderstruck at the display in front of him. As far as he knew, no human ever had flown on the back of a dragon. Of course there had been legends and tales of a time where things were different, but those were myths. And now he saw not only a human ready to fly on a dragon's back, but also 2 huge brown bears. All right, Charlie said finally before he mounted his broom, and the whole 20-minute flight back to the reserve he kept looking next to him where Harry and 2 bears flew on the back of a dragon alongside him, and he really hoped he could get a picture of this someday, because nobody would ever believe him. Charlie led them to one of the enclosures they used for injured and sick dragons, and from far away they could hear the firebolt roar, and then to Charlie's astonishment the dragon with Harry and the two bears on her back just landed in the enclosure as if the angry Firebolt was nothing more than an upset puppy. As Harry and the bears jumped off the back of the dragon, Charlie landed next to his boss Alex and started explaining while they watched the young boy work with the dragon. "Hush now, beautiful one, please calm down," Harry said soothingly while he walked towards the angry red dragons. "Please, I mean no harm, all I want is to help you." The Firebolt roared but held her flame. "Speaker?" she asked, confused but hopeful. "Yes, I'm a speaker, and if you tell me what is wrong with you then I can help you. Are you in pain?" The Firebolt roared again but held her flames and closed her long wings and held them against her body. "No, the humans healed me, but they left my hatchling," the dragon cried desperately. "All alone, my den collapsed. The humans freed me but left my hatchling." The large red dragon dropped down and curled herself up in a giant ball filled with desperation. Harry swallowed back the tears he felt burning inside his throat. The desperate cries of the dragon almost broke his heart. "I will find your hatchling, and I will bring it back with me," Harry promised. Oh, he wished he could promise he could bring her baby back alive and unharmed, but he knew not to make such kind of promises. After one last pat on the nose of the desperate dragon, he walked towards Charlie, who was watching him from a safe distance with a man that Harry recognized after Charlie's description as the boss of the reserve. Alex was his name. Harry didn't like strangers and didn't trust them, so completely ignored the man as he focused on Charlie. "We need to get to the cave where you found her. She has a baby in the cave." Charlie and his boss paled, but Harry went on before they could say anything more. "I need Charlie to lead me to the cave and I will see what I can do for the little one." Charlie nodded in understanding and looked at his boss for permission. The man looked at Harry for a couple of seconds before he gave his permission with a sharp nod. Harry walked back towards Ruby and climbed back on her back with one of the bears. The other bear placed himself next to the desperate dragon in an attempt to calm and comfort her. "Go as fast as you can, we will follow," Harry said before Ruby spread her mighty wings and took off. Charlie did not hesitate, and with a strong kick he followed the odd trio into the sky. Charlie had flown many times. He had been a seeker for the Gryffindor team and he could have had a professional career after, but his love for dragons had been way stronger than his love for the game, as he could fly as much as he wanted around the reserve, but never in all his time flying had he ever pushed his broom as hard as he did now. The tears in his eyes blurred his vision, but as he took a quick glance over his shoulder and saw the worried face of the young boy, he pushed his broom even further, and for a second he worried if his broom would ever fly again after this. Finally, the place where they had found the Chinese Firebolt in the collapsed cave came into sight. Charlie landed next to the dragon in the rubbles of the cave, and even though Charlie landed just seconds after the dragon, the little boy was already pushing huge boulders away with the help of his bear. The three of them made quick work at opening an entrance while Ruby watched over them. The large dragon was too big to help without risking another collapse. When the opening was large enough, Harry slid through before Charlie had even progressed what he was doing and was too late to stop him. "Harry, please come back, it isn't safe," Charlie begged into the dark opening. The bear and dragon both paced restless on their spots. When the clock almost hit the 10-minute mark and Charlie was ready to get help, as he was sure that something had happened to the boy, was it that he saw a light flickering in the dark. He let himself fall onto his stomach and crawled as far as he could inside. "Harry, do you need help? Please say something." Some sand and small rocks fell down on them and Charlie could almost cry in relief when he heard, "Can you stretch your arms? I have the baby, it is injured, but I can't lift myself out of the cave with a dragon in my arms. He will not hurt you." It took some fumbling, but Charlie finally managed to get hold of the baby dragon and held it close to his chest as he wiggled his way backwards. With a sigh of relief he came out of the dark, and with a worried look he waited for Harry to emerge. When Harry finally stood upright and patted all the sand and dust off his clothes, he said, "Thanks, Charlie. I have no idea how I would have done that without you. I was afraid that if I used my magic to lift him while I couldn't see what I was doing, that the whole cave would collapse again. I'm glad I could help," Charlie said with a dumbstruck grin on his face. He was holding a real baby dragon that seemed to enjoy the scratches on his head. "Let's get him back to his mum and then we can see to his injuries. I don't think we can save his wing," Harry said sadly as he inspected the bloodied and broken wing as gently as he could. "He is young and we have some great healers at the reserve, and we now have the ability to explain what we are doing and keep him and his mother calm. We have a good chance he will at least keep his wing." Charlie said, a little hopeful as he handed Harry the baby dragon. It would be a safer and easier trip for the little one with Harry than on his broom. The flight back went a lot slower, but they still made it as the baby dragon needed medical care and his mother. When the reserve came into sight, Charlie frowned because it looked as if a large crowd had gathered at the enclosure of the Chinese Firebolt. The moment Harry landed next to the Firebolt and Charlie next to his boss, the crowd burst through the gates with a loud noise and flashing cameras. "Mr. Potter, do you have a comment for the Daily Prophet?" "Harry, can I have your autograph? Do you have a comment for the Daily Prophet? Are you really our Dragon King? Harry, I love you." "Harry, thank you for saving us from you-know-who." Harry froze as the mass of people pushed closer while they shouted through each other. He shot a panicked look at his mother, who roared and stepped in front of him and was in a moment's notice joined by two bears. With widespread eyes of horror, he looked at the shouting humans and he shielded his eyes from the bright flashes of light. When the loud roaring of the dragons didn't hold the crazy mass aback, and crazy they were as they ignored the angry roaring dragon, all to take a piece of the small terrified boy behind her. Then she had enough. Just a couple of feet in front of the mob of humans, she shot out a huge wall of fire that finally stopped them. Ruby roared even louder, and her roar was answered by two of her daughters who soon landed next to her. The three large dragons held the mass while Harry, shivering and in shock, held out the baby for its mother to see. The little dragon was the only reason Harry was still there. Everything inside him was screaming to run away, to go back to the valley where he was safe, to climb on the back of his mother and let her carry him to safety as she had done many times. Tiny had left her spot next to her brother, and with her huge, what was small in comparison with her brother's fury body, she shields him from sight while giving comfort and protection. The Chinese Firebolt had gone through so much already, and the shouting mob of humans in her enclosure didn't help. It was only thanks to Harry and his ability to communicate with the dragon that she didn't attack, and when she saw her hatchling she almost forgot about the humans in her enclosure, so happy she was to have him back in her safety. Behind Ruby and her daughters, Harry saw how Charlie and his boss drove the humans back. They waved their wands and shouted angrily. Harry had no clue what was going on, and he hated it. Charlie had promised no other humans, just him and his boss. Charlie and his boss were soon joined by other dragon trainers. Together they made a quick end of the mob as they drove them out of the dragon enclosure. When the silence finally returned, Harry let out a sigh of relief and was more than happy when he could wrap his arms around Tiny, as his arms were not holding the little dragon any longer, and the huge brown bear just sat down with the little boy in her arms and hugged him back. "Harry, are you all right?" Harry lifted his head and turned a little from the warm embrace of the bear and saw Charlie, his boss, and a woman standing not that far away but far enough from the dragons that were still protecting and guarding the enclosure. "Harry, I'm so sorry for what happened. Apparently someone has leaked through the press that you were here. I told you about how the world sees you as their savior, do you remember?" When Harry nodded, Charlie went on, "When they read in the paper of your whereabouts, they decided to come see you for themselves, and they also believe some old tale, but that doesn't matter for now. They came because they wanted to see you for themselves." "But I don't want to see them." Charlie smiled. "I know, and we made sure they don't get back inside like that again. Now, you already know Alex, my boss, and the woman next to him is Anna. She is the best dragon healer a dragon reserve can wish for besides yourself." Harry flushed a little but slowly wrapped himself out of the bear hug and waved a small hello before he said, "You can come closer, and if healer Anna explains to me what she needs to do, I can tell it to the dragons." The Chinese Firebolt was very distrusting about the humans, but Harry convinced her to let Anna help her little one. It was a little difficult to explain to the baby dragon that he could not chew on the cast that Anna had placed around his wing, but in the end the little dragon let it happen, as he was promised lots and lots of rabbits in return for his good behavior. When Anna was finally done, Harry wanted nothing more than to leave and get some rest, peace and quiet. He barely could remember a time he had to interact with people, as his relatives had wanted nothing to do with him, and most of his time was spent in the cupboard under the stairs. "So, Charlie, I've got to go now," Harry stammered after Anna had put all her stuff back in her bag and was ready to leave. Charlie frowned as he looked at the young boy. "Are you sure? You could stay for dinner if you like." Harry shook his head, even though he liked the idea of not having to cook that night, but for now all he home with his mom and cubs safe at their valley. "Thanks, but I've got loads of stuff to do. Bella needs to be milked and I need to check my traps." Charlie nodded, even though he didn't like to let the boy go. His youngest brother was the Same age, and Charlie almost wished he could scoop him up and bring him home to his own mother. He was sure his mom would take care of the boy as if he was her own, but he knew Harry would not appreciate such rescue, so instead Charlie said, "All right, but I'm bringing you breakfast in the morning. To check up on you went unsaid." Harry smiled a little and nodded, "See you tomorrow." Then he turned around and Charlie watched for the second time how a little boy climbed on the back of a dragon with two huge bears and flew away. He was as amazed as the first time, and when he looked at his boss and Anna he saw the same expression on their faces as he felt. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I don't care that you are the bloody mugwump. You could be the bloody king of the world and I would still tell you to fuck off. Alex shouted angry at Albus Dumbledore. You don't like the fact that the boy doesn't want to go to your school. Alex, you know that young Harry can't stay here. Hogwarts will be his home. He will gain friends and soon forget about all this nonsense. Albus said calmly while sipping his tea. He is perfectly fine, he has lived here for years and I'm not forcing him to leave. He isn't safe, he is the boy who lived, and the world is starting to believe that he is the Dragon King Merlin has prophesied, Albus said firmly. Alex snorted, he wasn't safe before he came here, otherwise he would be perfectly fine and happy with the family you left him with, and how the world came to this belief had nothing to do with you. There are things you don't understand. He was safe with his relatives for reasons I can't disclose, and the same counts for his return to Britain and his attendance at Hogwarts. Well, lucky for the boy that he came to my Dragon Reserve, a place where that doesn't have to answer to you or your government. The only rules I have to follow are the rules of my people, and perhaps humans have forgotten the time of the Dragon Riders, and even though we lost our connection with them and we cannot fly on their backs or communicate with them as in times of old, but we remember. You have forgotten the history, but we have not. Dragons love treasure. The only problem with humans is that they have forgotten the greatest treasure in this world while the dragons have remembered. Alex spat. And what may that be? Albus asked friendly while his blue eyes twinkled. Love, perhaps. Alex shook his head disappointed. It's a shame that you as a headmaster of one of the greatest magical schools in the world have to ask. The answer is children. The greatest treasure in this world are our children. Albus looked shocked for a second, but soon he smiled again and the twinkle returned to his eyes, but before he could speak Alex raised his hands and shook his head. Don't. Just don't. He turned around and walked out of the room. At the door he turned around and said, "Remember your school motto, Draco Dormiens Nunquam Titulandis. Asterisk asterisk asterisk." As soon as Ruby landed at the entrance of the cave, Harry jumped off her back and walked into the cave, and he let himself fall down on a pile of soft furs, soon joined by his cubs, and even though it was hot, very hot, as he was surrounded by 4 warm, furry bears, he wouldn't change it for the world. A little frustrated, he wiped the tears from his cheeks. He hated this feeling. Why had those humans come? He wanted nothing to do with those loud screaming people or with the old man that kept coming back and wanting him to go to Hogwarts. The man had spoken of his parents and how they had wanted him to go, but he had never known them. All he knew was his life at the valley with his mom and cubs, and he didn't want to leave them. He wasn't ready to face the world filled with loud screaming humans, and why would he want to learn magic in a castle? His mom had taught him more magic than he ever needed, and what was that about him being king? He was Harry, just Harry. It was almost dark when Harry finally left the hot bear pit. His stomach had started rumbling hours ago, and he knew that Bella had to be milked as he could hear her call from the stable. He smiled when he saw his mom, and what looked like all of her daughters had joined her in the valley. Ruby was one of the only known dragons to humans that kept in touch with her offspring. What the humans didn't know was that dragons had family just like them, and for dragons, family means everything, and danger had invaded their home in the form of humans that wanted to take her hatchling. It was something Ruby had feared from the moment she had taken the bloodied and broken human child home, and if he had wanted she would have let him go. But the fact that Harry didn't want to leave had made her decision to call for her daughters to help her guard the valley more easier. No one would take her child away from her. Harry patted Bella and gave the cow some fresh hay while he started milking her. It always calmed his mind, and in no time the bucket was filled with warm fresh milk. He emptied the large tub of water and filled it with fresh water with a wave of his hand. It had taken to learn that spell, but what had made it his life easier, as he didn't need to carry up buckets filled with water from down the river. He knew the cow could easily walk down the river if she was thirsty. She spent most of her time down grazing, only to return to her little stable at night. But he liked to take care of her, and he didn't want to walk down the river every time he wanted a drink, so why should she? He wasn't really in the mood to cook, so decided to warm up some soup he had stored with some bread he had made the day before. While the soup was warming up, he took a basket and picked some of the ripe fruits and berries from the trees and bushes he had planted. He loved his little garden. It had started so small in his first year, and now the trees were filled with fruits and the bush held more berries than he could ever eat, but lucky he had 4 hungry bears that loved those berries. Nothing was ever going to waste, and he would find use for everything, as he hated to throw things away. He saved everything. That was the reason his storage hut was now filled with baskets with different kinds of furs, pelts and hides, all prepped in a different way for different uses. With the help of Ruby, he had learned to make beautiful soft pelts. He also had more dried spices, plants and herbs than he could ever need, but as he learned of all their uses, including their medicinal uses, he started to store more as he healed more and more small injuries on not only the dragons but other magical creatures. Not long ago he had healed a botruckle with a cold. He chopped up the gathered ingredients and divided it for the bears and poured a large scoop of honey on it before he gave it to them. He loved spoiling them, and after the day they all had, they all deserved a little bit of spoiling. When it was time for him to go to bed, he took his bed furs, and with his cubs following him, he made his bed next to his mum. Tonight wasn't a night he wanted to sleep alone and where his cubs were not enough. Tonight he needed the safety of his mom. Soft talking, he finally fell asleep with Tiny at his side underneath his mother's large wing. *******. Chapter endnotes. Next chapter will be posted when I have the time. At the moment things are really busy. Cold sweat smile. Chapter 4. Chapter notes. This cold and rainy Sunday deserves a chapter update. Smile. I'm truly amazed at the comments and kudos left by you all. It made me 100% believe I'm writing for more people than just my imaginary friends. Tongue out. Comments and reviews are the positive boost that made me want to write, even if I barely have the time or I'm just too tired. It makes me pick up my tablet to at least try and edit a chapter so I can share it with you all. Thank you all for reading. Big hug, LadyRava, smiling face with open hands. See the end of the CHA Chapter 4. In the days that followed after his first encounter with the screaming mob of humans, Harry wasn't aware of all the chaos outside of the small valley where he happily lived with his mother, a Ukrainian ironbelly and one of the largest dragons flying around on Earth, and his 4 bear cubs that could be called anything but cubs. His life was as it was before, and he couldn't be happier. The only difference was Charlie. The man visited him every day and sometimes more than once. Charlie knew because Harry had told him many times that he didn't need anything, but Charlie couldn't help himself but wonder multiple times a day what he could do to make the young boy's life easier. So Charlie had written to his mom and explained the situation. Molly Weasley, the amazing woman she was, had sent their family owl named Errol, who needed a full week to recover, with a shrunken package filled with everything his mom could think of the boy could need. At first Harry had been confused with all the new things and had no clue why a stranger would gift him with so much, and it took a lot of convincing from Charlie before Harry would accept what was given. Harry was still amazed by the woman, as the woman had sent him easy recipes even he could decipher with his small reading abilities that had been adjusted so Harry could make them with the ingredients and utilities he had. She also had sent along a couple of incredibly tasteful examples he had enjoyed very much. She had sent him cocoa powder, and the only thing he needed to add was some fresh milk that Bella gave him, and he got chocolate milk, and it was by far his favorite drink he ever had. And when Charlie told him how nice it would taste warmed up when it started to get cold, and Harry could imagine why, he just loved it. Harry had decided that the nice lady deserved something in return, and with a happy smile he had taken one of his best-looking crates and had filled it up with some of the soft pelts he had made, his own special blend of tea including some delicious honey biscuits. He also wanted to add one of his nicest furs but wasn't sure what a woman who had 7 children would like, so in the end he decided to give her the beautiful white leopard fur with its head still attached. One of Ruby's daughters had brought it back with her. All the dragons had learned that he had liked the furs of different animals, and even though he had many beautiful furs, this one was one of the most beautiful, and it had taken him a long time to make it as soft and beautiful as it was now. He hoped the woman would love it. She could make a cloak out of it, or if she didn't like to wear it she could use it as a bed cover. Harry was more than happy to send out one of Ruby's daughters with the crate towards Britain. That Molly Weasley almost fainted when a large dragon landed in her backyard at the burrow is another story. But it is more than safe to say that Molly Weasley was very grateful for the thoughtful thank you gift. The only thing was that she would rather that it had sent With an owl instead of an dragon, but she didn't want to come over as ungrateful even though the dragon had scared 10 years off her life. Harry, I have to ask even though I know the answer. Charlie started while they sat together next to the fire by the cave. Are you sure you don't want to go to Hogwarts? Harry sighs, yeah, I'm not leaving my cubs or my mom, besides how am I supposed to write or read any of the assignments the teachers hand out? Do you know how hard it is to read those recipes your mom sent me? You can't read? Nope, I went to school for 2 weeks before they left me. The only reason I can read the little bit I can is because Petunia forced me to learn her recipes. I'm sorry. Charlie said with a frown. He wanted to say so much more, but he knew if he would get further into the subject Harry would ignore him or just take off. Harry shrugged, it doesn't matter, I don't really need to read or write that much. You could make friends at Hogwarts, my little brother Ron is going for his first year and I think you would like him. I never had friends before, I don't like humans that much and I think they don't like me that much. I like you. Charlie smiled. Harry blushed a little but hid it as he poured them some apple juice. I'm sure. I don't want to go to Hogwarts, this is my home. Charlie nodded. Well, if you don't want to go then you don't, and as I said before you can be whoever you want to be. You are not their savior or their king. Harry sighs, it's just really hard to believe that people think I'm their king. I can barely read, how am I supposed to rule over the whole magical world, it's just crazy. Little hatchling, officially you are a prince as you are my son. Ruby said as she landed next to them. Harry's eyes widened. What? How? Why did you not tell me this before? Ruby snorted, it wasn't important and you are still a young hatchling. My family has ruled for as long as there has been life on Earth. Harry stared at his mother for a couple of seconds before he shook his head. So you are a queen? Ruby sat up straight and said smugly, I'm the queen, and simply put you are my heir, so you are a prince and someday you could be king if you want. Why me? Why not one of your daughters? Saphira would be a great queen. Ruby laughed. Saphira would hate to be queen, hates rules, and you are my son, my only son, and once a wise man told me that my son would unite the magical world and be its king and rightful ruler. But I'm not your real son, you just found me, it can't be about me, I'm just Harry, the freak in the cupboard underneath the stairs. Ruby roared angry, it had been a long time since he had fallen back in his old behavior and called himself a freak. Don't call yourself that, ever. You are as much my child as any of my daughters. Blood doesn't make family. That you didn't come out of an egg I hatched doesn't change anything about my love for you or the fact that you are my child and son. Harry sniffed a little and ignored the worried look on Charlie's face as he sniffed a little. I'm sorry Mom, it's just a lot. I know little hatchling. Ruby said as she accepted the hug Harry gave her. I really thought it was a joke, me being king. I really thought those humans were crazy. Those humans are crazy. Ruby said with a snort, but they are right in their belief that you could be their king someday, only if you want. As everything in your life, it is your choice. Harry nodded in understanding and he knew he needed some time to think this over and progress it all. I love you Mom. I love you too, I will go hunting while you speak with your friend. With a last hug from Harry she spread her large wings and took off. A little sheepish Harry turned back to face a confused Charlie. I'm sorry for that, it's just. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, Charlie said quickly even though he was burning with curiosity. Harry sighs, my mom just sort of said it was true what those humans are saying. Charlie frowned, what do you mean? Well, she said as I'm her son that makes me a prince, and if I wanted I could be the king that Merlin guy talked about. Harry said, a little embarrassed. Charlie's mouth almost dropped to the floor and he didn't know what to do or say. Did he truly sit next to their king? Was this scrawny little kid dressed in animal hides really their long-lost king that would bring their world into a new golden age? So, what now? Harry shrugged, now nothing, I'm just Harry and nothing has changed. Harry, everything has changed. People have been waiting for you for centuries. Especially the old pure blood families will be lining up to declare their loyalty. Not only humans but the whole magical world will want you to rule. You are supposed to be the end of injustice and bigotry. Harry snorted, that is a lot to put on someone's shoulders, and I don't think I'm interested in taking it upon mine. I know, but that is what everyone believes and you just confirmed it. Jup, Hat, and you are not telling them. Charlie sighs, I won't say anything but I don't think this is going away. While Charlie said goodbye as Harry had more than enough to do, They didn't notice how a small green beetle that had been sitting next to them on a stone flew away as fast as it could. Asterisk 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 Harry was checking up on his provisions he had stored for the winter. He was making a list. With all the things he needed before the fall and winter came and drove the hot summer away, most of his time was spent making sure there was enough food for the winter and stocking his medicinal herbs and plants. He whistled happily as he gave a quick look in Bella's stable to make sure it was clean in. She had everything when she returned to her stable for the night. The only thing he needed to do was give her some hay to munch on. He scratched Tiny between the ears and waited for her to get up before he walked out of the cave ready to check his traps when Charlie flew towards them as if death was following him. "Harry, please tell your dragons to stand down. People are coming to talk to you," Charlie almost shouted as soon as he was in hearing distance. Harry frowned and looked at the valley where his mother and her daughters were still standing guard. "Your boss promised that no humans would come to the valley." Charlie landed and took a couple of deep breaths. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Harry. Somehow the press knows about our conversation and that your mother confirmed that you were the prophesied king. I don't know how they know, and I promise you we did everything we could to stop them, but it isn't only Wixen who want to meet you. There is a squadron of goblins marching this way followed by a group of vampires, and I didn't mention the magical creatures that are making their way here." Harry paled when he heard that, and somehow he knew he had to face them. They weren't going away if he kept hidden, and he was afraid that his family would get hurt if they tried to hide away, so he took a deep breath, strengthened his back, and with his hand on Tiny's head he made his way down to warn his mother for the upcoming storm. When the large mass came out of the woods, Harry shivered and climbed onto a large rock. He didn't want them all to look down on him or surround them. His mom laid down in front of the rock while the cubs all tried to join Harry on the rock, and even though the rock was large, it wasn't big enough to hold 4 magically full-grown bears, and even though Tiny was the smallest, she won from her big brothers and joined him on the rock, and Teddy, Hunter and Shadow sat themselves next to Ruby while Teddy demanded scratches between the ears from Charlie. Ruby's daughters placed themselves as a guard of honor, and the group approaching had to walk past them to get closer. Harry watched as the humans came closer, followed by a group of armored and dangerous-looking goblins. "My king," a man with long blonde hair said as soon as he was close enough and dropped on his knees. "It is an honor to see that you have finally returned to us." Harry raised an eyebrow and scratched his head through his black-haired mess. He said in response. The man didn't seem bothered by the lack of words as he continued. "We're here to pledge our loyalty and servitude." Harry looked at the still kneeling man and shook his head. Even if he became king, he never wanted people on their knees for him. "Yeah, please stand. I'm no king." The man hesitantly looked up. "Even if you are not crowned, you are still our king. The king we have been waiting for." "Look, I'm just Harry and I'm not interested in being king. Do you have any idea how much I have to do before winter? And please stand, your knees must be bothering you by now." The man blinked, and after a couple of seconds he slowly rose to his feet and said, "I'm grateful to be allowed to stand in your presence, my king." Harry sighs and he tiredly shakes his head. This was going to be a really long day. He looked a little desperate at Charlie, who tried to hide a massive grin. "What do you want from me?" The man looked confused. "We want you to be our king and rule, bring our nation to a golden age, let magic grow in." Harry raised his hand. "Yeah, I have no idea how to do all of that. I'm not a king. I'm just Harry, and I need to prepare for the winter. I need to make sure that my cubs are fed and taken care of. I need to heal the dragons and other creatures that seek my help, and most importantly I need to get my diner off the fire before it gets burned." The man looked disbelieving. "No king needs to make his own food." He snapped his fingers and a creature with large eyes and huge bat-like ears dressed in a filthy pillowcase appeared next to the man, shaking in fear. "Dobby, you are now in the service of our king. You will be as loyal to him as you have been to the House of Malfoy, is that understood?" The creature was shaking from head to toe, and he nodded in understanding. The man took a thin scarf from a woman behind him and handed it to the creature. "You are now freed and you will bond with your king," the man ordered. The creature was trembling and shaking, but after a stern look he climbed onto the rock and took Harry's hand. Dobby's vows to be the best house elf he can be for his new king. A flash of light and the bond was settled. "What the fuck?" Harry cursed, using his newly learned swear word from Charlie for the first time. "Dobby is yours to command," Dobby said while he bowed deeply and his nose touched the dirt. Charlie took pity on the boy and climbed on the rock and quickly explained what a house elf was and that Dobby was now his, and then it took several more minutes to explain that Dobby wasn't a slave. He wanted to serve, and yes, he wasn't treated well by his former master. That was obvious as they all could see the bruises and bandages that covered the small elf, but Harry could do better. If Dobby was freed he would die. A house elf needed to work and serve a family to calm and settle their magic as much as people needed food and sleep. All right. I accept your house elf because he is way better off with me and my cubs living in a cave than with you where he is hurt. Harry finally said to the man who had given him a house elf. I don't know if I will become king, but if I do I will let you know. There are loads of other people who want to talk to me and I don't want to be here all night. The man nodded and didn't seem happy with the turn of events. I will make my leave, but know that House Malfoy will be at your service. The man said with a bow and stepped back. His place was immediately taken by the group of goblins. My name is Griphook and my king sent us to form an alliance. We will not bow, but we swear to protect and keep the secrets of the Dragon King. We accept your claim and hope you will allow us to finally live above ground with all our customs and traditions. Harry looked disbelieving. Are your traditions so bad that you have to live underground? Griphook looked confused. What do you mean, Dragon King? Well, do you kill people or hurt them for your traditions? Is that why you have to live underground? The reason that we are forced underground is a long and bloody tale in which the Goblin nation got his heart and soul broken. Griphook replied. Did you heal? Griphook looked surprised at the young boy. This wasn't what he expected, and the concern in the boy's voice and eyes was genuine, and for the first time since King Ragnarok had given him the order to meet the new Dragon King. Griphook felt something like hope rise inside his heart. Hope he had thought to be long lost. As much as one is able after such loss. Harry nodded and Griphook watched as the young king spoke with his mother. A shiver went through the group of humans as they heard the hisses of Parseltongue. All right. So my mom says that officially no humans have a say over this valley, as this is my mom's home for longer than this reserve exists. We can do as we please. I invite you and the children of your nation for a visit. No child should grow up without the sun, the darkness in my cupboard. You want us to visit? Griphook asked, amazed. Yup. I know a visit isn't that much, but my cave isn't big enough for everyone, but the children have a chance to play in the sun. Griphook just blinked in response, so Harry quickly added, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I don't know, I just hate the thought of children and you all living underground. Young Dragon King. Griphook finally replied. You honor us all with your kindness. I'm sure you have no idea what you have just given us, and I will make sure you will learn in the years that will come. For now I offer my thanks and gratitude following by our offer to ward your home and act as your guards even though we are unnecessary. He said while pointing at the dragons and bears. We will speak with you later, and if you are done with talking to people just give us the word and we will make sure they leave. Harry felt a little awkward at the grin Griphook gave him, but he was grateful for the offer as he was already getting tired and he had just talked to 2 people and there were dozens and dozens more waiting. Griphook and the other goblins took stand next to Charlie and their spot was immediately taken by Albus Dumbledore, and when he saw him he shook his head. Nope, not today. My boy. Albus started and Harry shook his head. No, Mr. Dumbledore, I'm not going to Hogwarts, so you can leave. Griphook flinched a little when a huge bear pushed him forwards, but immediately understood the intention and stepped forwards, followed by a couple of goblins. Mr. Dumbledore, as you heard, it is time for you to leave. Albus Dumbledore tried to convince Griphook to let him stay and tried to get Harry's attention again, but was ignored in favor of a house elf, and so the headmaster was, gently, guided away. The headmaster was followed by the British and Romanian ministers of magic. Both offered to help and spoke a lot of difficult words that Harry happily ignored as he took a big bite of his egg sandwich Dobby had made him. After the ministers, a couple of families wanted to express their gratitude for defeating the Dark Lord and hope for the future with him being king. The man that came after the families introduced himself as Xenophilius Lovegood, and he was the owner of the Quibbler, and he only had questions about the dragons, bears and other creatures in the valley, while his daughter, who was introduced as Luna, had walked up to Teddy and without any hesitation or fear just started hugging and cuddling with the huge brown bear. After his conversation with Xenophilius, Harry had enough. It was already getting dark and Bella needed to be milked and he was just beyond tired. He asked Griphook to let all the people still waiting know that he was done for the day and he would talk tomorrow afternoon with more people after he got some food. rest and checked up on the things that needed to be done. Griphook had no problem to tell everyone to fuck off, and Harry ignored the shouting as he climbed on Tiny's back, and with his head in her soft fur he let himself get carried back to his cave, followed by Charlie and Dobby. When Harry woke up the next morning after his valley had been invaded by humans, goblins, vampires and other creatures, he knew he couldn't face them again. Not today. He needed a moment to breathe and progress everything. He didn't like the rush, the noise and all the fuss. He wasn't even sure why he had faced them all yesterday. He didn't like humans, so why had he allowed them to talk to him? Harry sighs and stands up to prepare breakfast, and he was shocked to find pancakes with blueberries and a fresh glass of milk waiting for him next to an insecure-looking house elf. Dobby made breakfast for the Great Dragon King, Master Harry Potter, sir. Harry shook his head tiredly. Dobby, I told you last night, just Harry please. Dobby nodded happily. Does the Great Master Harry want anything else? Dobby already milked Great Master Harry's cow and chopped fruit with honey for breakfast for Great Master Harry's bears. Harry sighs, just Harry, and thank you Dobby. Make sure you eat something and then you make yourself some clean clothes. That pillowcase is just horrible. Dobby agreed happily, and with tears in his eyes he took a plate and sat down to eat. Harry yawned and started on his pancakes. He liked them very much and he was really grateful that he didn't have to make breakfast himself. He was just so incredibly tired. After he had left the people who wanted to meet him, he spoke for hours on end with his mom, Griphook and Charlie. Griphook had promised that while he slept the goblins would make a path through the forest to the valley, and with the right wards it was the only way in or out of the valley for anyone or anything that wasn't invited, and guarding the valley and the surrounding area was made a lot easier for the dragons and goblins. When Griphook told him how a small cabin would be built next to the beginning of the path to the valley with a permanent squad of goblins to guard the place, Harry had panicked, because how was he supposed to feed all those people through the winter, or their wages? He didn't have any money. That had resulted in both Griphook and Charlie bursting out in laughter, which Harry didn't appreciate, but Charlie had explained to him that the goblins took care of themselves and he didn't have to worry about money, as his parent had left him more money he could spend in a lifetime. Besides that, he didn't have to pay the goblins, and when he asked why, Griphook had grinned and told him he would learn it along the way. Harry splashed some water in his face after he was finished eating, and Dobby cleaned away the dishes. He took a quick look in Bella's stable and saw that Dobby had already done everything from refilling the water and hay to mocking out the stable. It was only when he realized he had some free time that he whistled for his cubs and took out the grooming bag down to the valley. It had been some time since he had brushed the cubs or had taken care of any itching and loose scales that his mom had. It would be a morning where they all could relax a little and take comfort out of each other's company, just some family time after all the chaos. Mom, why didn't you tell me about me being a king or prince? Harry asked while he was working on some of the itching scales on her back. Ruby sighs, you had enough on your shoulders as it was. You had so much work in keeping yourself and the cubs alive, and when you found a nice Ritme in your life, I didn't want you to worry about matters that weren't important in this part of your life. When you became an adult I would have told you, and then we would have many years to adjust before you would have taken on the crown. Harry picked out a loose scale and put it in his bag. So on my 17th birthday you would just say, "Oh Harry, before I forget, you are a prince and someday you will be the king that the Wixen world has been waiting for centuries." And then I would open my presents and found a hideous crown I was forced to wear every day. Ruby snorted and some flames escaped her nose. You know very well that that is not the way that I would have told you, and your crown will be beautiful. This isn't how I wanted things to go, but there is nothing we can do than adjust and adapt. Learn what is necessary, and you have to remember that you do what makes you happy. Harry sighs and lets his head rest on the back of his mom. What if I don't want to be king, and I just want to be Harry, living in this valley with his mom and cubs? Then you will be just Harry living in his valley with his mother, cubs and sisters. Harry laughed. How could I forget about them? They talked some more, and when Harry was done grooming one dragon and 4 bears and was cuddling with Hunter, was it that he decided that he wouldn't make a decision now. He would learn more about being king and what people were expecting from him, as he was just 11 years old. He would listen and talk with everyone, and it didn't matter to him if they Wixen or creature. He would see and talk with them, but on his own time. He would make sure he had some time every day for those who wished to speak with him, and he was sure that with the help of Griphook and Charlie something could be arranged, as they both had offered their help and he shouldn't hesitate to ask, even though he did The next step of course was to make sure that he had enough in storage for the winter, as he was sure that he would invite the goblins or Charlie over for dinner and he wanted not to have to worry about food or snacks for his guests. He also wanted to make sure that a part of the valley would be for the goblin children that came to visit. He wanted them to have a nice time, but he had no idea what goblin children or any kind of children did for fun, as his kind of fun was different than theirs, of that he was sure. He also needed to think of how he wanted to receive his guests, as Griphook had pointed out that the rock wasn't the right meeting place for a king, and of course again came the problem of the winter, as it would be way too cold to talk with people outside or when the fall came. And the rain poured down on them for days on end, but he really didn't want all those strangers in his cave, in his home. That was his and he wouldn't share it, as it was his safe haven. His best bet was to speak with Griphook and Charlie if they had any ideas, and if they didn't he just had to manage his time better, so he had time to build a small barn, like his storage hut. It wouldn't be much, but it was better than facing the elements, and with a fire pit they would be warm. He only needed to chop more firewood. Harry sighed and rubbed his eyes tiredly. His chore list became an unbearable list, but he had never had a problem with hard work, and he was sure it wouldn't be as hard as his first year in the valley. He packed his grooming bag and with one last hug he said bye to his mom and went looking for Griphook. ***** chapter end notes. See you all next time. I make no promises I can't keep, so the next chapter will be posted when it's posted. Cold sweat smile. Chapter 5 Chapter notes. Merry Christmas everyone. Christmas tree Santa. I thought it to be a nice Christmas present if I posted a new chapter. Gift. If today is hard for whatever reason, I hope this chapter will give you some distraction from it all. Smile. My little Christmas wish for you all is that this chapter will bring you some joy. Purple heart big hug. LadyRava smiling face with open hands. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 5. You could say a lot of things about Molly Weasley, but if you thought she was going to leave a child that was the same age as her youngest son living alone in a cave with just animals, no matter how intelligent as company, to fend for himself, you were sorely mistaken. She didn't care that he was the boy who lived or their long-lost king. At the moment he was a child. Make no mistake, she had waited for their king to be found just as any other in their world, but for now all she could see was a child living in a cave. When she first got Charlie's letter about the boy, she wanted nothing more than to grab her clock and take the earliest portkey to Romania and bring him home. Everything inside her screamed to bring him home and smother him with love and care, but she also knew, thanks to her son's letter, that the boy saw the dragon he was living with as his mother, the 4 bears he had raised as his family, and if the boy loved his family even half as she did hers, he would never leave them. So instead of taking him home, she had sent in a care package and hoped he would like it and it would help him a little. She had never ever in all her years expected anything in return, let alone delivered by a dragon. When she saw the beautiful hand-crafted crate, she wasn't sure what to do at first. The dragon just flew away after putting the crate in front of her feet. After checking the crate for anything bad, she levitated it back to her kitchen. Inside the crate she found a letter that was written on leather with some charcoal, and it took her a couple of minutes to decipher the handwriting. It was a thank you note from Harry, and he hoped she liked the gift. When she saw the fur he sent her that belonged once to an beautiful white leopard, she gasped. This was a priceless gift and didn't match the small package she had sent at all. It was too much, but Molly knew that she couldn't refuse this gift, as the boy was already afraid she didn't like it and in his horrible handwriting had told her she could use it as a plaid for the floor or something. Not that she would ever do such a thing. Even if she didn't love it, she would still have appreciated and liked it, just as she had done with all the things her children had made her. When she showed her gift to her husband and children, all of them decided that they would chip in so that the fur could be made into a lovely cloak as a birthday gift. When she saw the fur again made into a cloak, she almost fainted. It was the most beautiful and expensive piece of clothing she ever had. This could be a family heirloom. Not even people like Narcissa Malfoy could say anything bad about the cloak. A gift like that deserved much more than a thank you letter, so she had started arranging matters so she could leave for Romania after her oldest kids went to school. She had asked her neighbor Xenophilius Lovegood if he could watch her youngest child, Ginny, but after hearing about her plans he decided to join her. He had visited for a day and had spoken briefly with their king, but he wanted nothing more than to return for another chat, and this was a perfect opportunity. So Molly had changed her plans, and even though he tried, her husband couldn't get free from work. Arthur worked for the ministry and they refused to give him any more vacation days as he had already taken them earlier that summer. She looked at the time and saw that it was almost time to leave, so she called out for her daughter and put her lovely new cloak on, and she silently thanked Merlin for cooling charms, as she would never have been able to wear her new cloak in this weather without getting a heat stroke in 5 minutes. Dressed in her new cloak and with her daughter at her side, they waited for the Lovegoods, who had the portkey that would take them to Romania. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. He really has no clue, Griphook said, and the humor sounded through his voice. Charlie shook his head. Nope, he had no clue. They watched as Harry walked back to the valley with his bears at his side. In the last week they had noticed how the boys seemed to look for them, and when he finally had found the courage to talk to them, he had stuttered and promptly invited them for dinner, which had gone on for a couple of days before the boy had disappeared for a few days. All the people that had wanted to meet and talk to him had been sent away with a promise he would meet them soon. When Harry had come back, he had invited Charlie and Griphook to a part of the valley that was not far away from the cave but had enough distance to give the feeling of privacy. It was a lovely small piece of land that one of Ruby's daughters normally used when she was hatching a clutch of eggs, but she had no problem sharing a nest with one of her sisters, so. With a blush, Harry had told Griphook that if the goblins wanted they could use it as their own. Ruby had explained to Harry about the ancient laws of old, and he still didn't understand it precisely, but it had to do with the prophecy Merlin had given, and it was then decided that the lands the Dragon King called his home rightfully belonged to them for the start of his kingdom. Harry hadn't liked the sound of it, as it felt to him as if he was stealing the land from people, but his mom had explained that the dragon reserve that reached beyond just Romania was built on the land her mother had given a long time under the promise that it would always belong to the dragons. In other words, if he wanted to give goblins a place to live, no one was able to stop him. It was only when Griphook said that no gold or treasure in the goblin nation could pay for the gift that was given, and that he sure was anything they could do for him. They were in his debt, and he shouldn't hesitate to ask if there was anything they could do for him. Harry had turned bright red at the gratitude, and it was only the hopeful look that Griphook gave him that he stumbled through his request, if they could build him something to meet the people that wanted to visit him, as he couldn't meet them outside when the fall came, and he was just too busy to do it himself, like he had done with the stable for Bella and his storage hut. He told them that it didn't have to be large, and he didn't want to be a burden or ask for more than they were willing to give, but Griphook had almost jumped in excitement and happiness that the goblins would have a way to repay his kindness in some way. Charlie, you take care of your new king while I'll inform my king of the gift that has been given. And I can guarantee that before the next moon the laughter of goblin children will echo through this valley. Charlie laughed. For the first time in my life I wish I was into politics, as I really want to see the faces of some people when they realize that there is nothing they can do and goblins will live above ground once more. Indeed, and it is our honor to be the first to be allowed to call this new kingdom our home, and even though I'm no seer, I see a future where we will be the first of many to find sanctuary and a home in this beautiful place. Charlie smiled. Welcome to Ruby's Valley. Welcome to your new home with the sun and moon shining upon you. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Harry was watching with open mouth at the activities in his valley. He had woken up with the sound of hammering and people talking, and when Dobby came to tell him that Griphook was waiting outside with King Ragnarok, he quickly got dressed, and after poking the sleeping bears, only Tiny came with him. She was always with him. He went outside to the waiting goblins. To everyone's surprise, King Ragnarok lifted the boy from his feet and swirled him around the moment he came into view. You, young man, have changed the future. You have given us our freedom. Harry had stammered that he had only done what everyone would have done if they could, but King Ragnarok had countered that and told him they could have been living above ground for centuries. The only restriction was that they had to be invited to live on the grounds that belonged to humans, and no human, Wixen or not, had ever opened their home for them or had given them lands to live on, until now. That had been unbelievable for Harry. How could people be so horrible as to force an entire race to live underground, even if it was to end a war? The goblins had rebelled to try to get their rights back, but after a horrible fight where the children of the king at that time were killed and the goblin nation was in mourning for their loss, was it that the Wixen of that time launched an attack and destroyed the goblin kingdom and forced them to retreat underground, and unfair treaties had been forced upon them. King Ragnarok had slapped him on the back and told him that that had been enough of their sad past, as this was the dawn of a new future, and took him so he could see the valley and how dozens and dozens of goblins were working. You gifted us with a place above ground to live. You are giving us a home, and I hope to give you the same in return. You are building a house for me? Harry asked disbelievingly and in shock, and he shook his head. This is too much. I can't ask you to build a whole house. King Ragnarok laughed. If you think we are laying one stone for our own houses before we build you one, then you are sorely mistaken. But, no buts, even though we live underground we have our homes. You live in a cave and you made it a lovely home. It isn't a house. Harry shook his head again. I can't live in a house, my mom wouldn't fit, and what about my cubs? He thought about the house he had lived in with his relatives and he could never live in something like that. King Ragnuk burst out laughing. We goblins have a different concept of a home than muggles or Wixen do. I promise you, young king, your new home will have more than enough space for your mother, cubs, guests and anything else you decided. You will see for yourself in a few days. A few days? King Ragnuk smiled, and while they walked down to the valley he explained how goblin builders couldn't compare with humans. They worked way quicker, and with the help of their magic and ancient techniques their buildings were quickly built and indestructible. They were used to working underground and those conditions were a lot harder, so this was an easy, fun side project before they would start on their own village. Young king, you have nothing to be worried about, we know how you want your house to be. And when Harry asked how, King Ragnuk had grinned mysteriously and told him that goblins had their ways before saying goodbye and leaving a thunderstruck Harry behind, who just kept standing and staring disbelieving while he scratched Tiny between the ears. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Mom. Bill. What are you two doing here? Charlie asked, surprised, while he gave his mother and older brother a hug. Well, you know me. I couldn't let a gift such as Harry gifted me without saying thank you in person, Molly said, smiling while she hugged him back. Charlie laughed. So that he is a boy living in a cave and you want to hug and smother him with love has nothing to do with it? Molly waved it away as if he spoke nonsense, but the flush of red in her smile told them all differently, and she showed off the cloak a little. Charlie, be a dear and show us where we are staying so we can put our bags down. But before Charlie could answer they heard, if this isn't a Weasley family meeting I don't know what is. Molly turned around and saw her eldest son with a bright smile on his face. Bill, she shouted happily before she smothered him in a huge hug, and when she let go her place was taken by Ginny. Bill grinned and greeted his family. I've got a job offer I couldn't refuse even though I love the sun and Paramidades. Molly looked confused but Charlie smiled happily. Let me guess, Griphook? Bill nodded. Yup. He visited me after others had recommended me for a job without knowing what it was about, and as my brother was already on the spot the goblins thought me transferring would be easier than to find someone with the same qualifications and working in the team they're forming. Well, I love having you here, Charlie said, happy, and he wrapped his arm around his brother's shoulder. I will show you where you stay after I showed Mom and the others their rooms. Together they walked chatting and laughing towards the small bungalows for guests. An uninspected family reunion without a lot of planning on Molly's part. She only wished the rest of her family could be with her as she missed her husband and sons. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Albus Dumbledore sat behind his desk and was making the last preparations for the welcoming feast later that night. Ever since his return from Romania he had been working around the clock. Not only the minister had been constantly trying to get more information about Harry that he didn't have. Amelia Bones had started an investigation and she had warned him that he should prepare himself for at least being charged with child endangerment and whatever else she would find along the way, and her first stop had been Privet Drive number 4, and what she had found wasn't anything Albus expected. He knew that Harry would never be loved in their home, but he never thought they would so far as to abuse him and abandon him in a different country. Vernon Dursley had no problem after some convincing from Madame Bones to tell them everything he had done to the freak. And it had taken Amelia Bones a lot of mental strength not to curse the family after she learned that he was treated even worse than a Malfoy house elf, as everyone knew how they treated their elves. Of course, after that conversation Amelia Bones found her way to Albus' office in no time, and she was more than stacks of old newspapers on his desk, and after a quick look Albus saw that they were all about the happy life Harry Potter was living, all confirmed by him. Amelia had looked at him as she had done to the eaters she had sent to Azkaban, and the look of disgust gave him shivers without saying a word. She left shaking her head and said, "You will hang for this even if it's the last thing I'll do." His visit from the head of the magical law enforcement wasn't the only thing that had kept him busy. He had gotten more howlers than he could count, and Molly Weasley even invested in a new family owl so she could send him a howler to wake him up and one to help him sleep, and that had been going on for weeks. Ever since the wizarding world had found out about the boy who lived with dragons. Albus rubbed his eyes tiredly and he looked at his beautiful phoenix, but ever since the truth had come out the bird had refused to look at him except in disappointment. He looked up when he got an alert that people were on their way upstairs, so he sat up straight and made sure he looked calm and friendly instead of tired and frustrated. The door slammed open and Severus strode inside, followed by Filius. "Good evening, Filius." "Severus, my boy, what can I do for you both?" Albus asked, and his blue eyes twinkled behind his glasses. Severus threw a scroll on his desk with a sneer. "This is my resignation, I quit." "But Severus, you can't leave. We need you here, and when Voldemort returns you are our most valuable asset in the war. You know that, my boy. And what about your vow towards Lily's son?" "My vow was to protect Lily's son, and you made me fail in that vow. You lied to me while Lily's son was abused and abandoned. My promise will stay as long as I draw breath, but not because of you, Dumbledore. You failed your promise the night Lily died, and you abandoned her son in the middle of the night on a doorstep." Severus snarled angrily. Albus sighs, and he knows he lost his potion master and spy, and he looked sadly from the corner of his at his chessboard, which resulted in another sneer. "If you looked less at your chessboard and realized the world is not a game you play with and people aren't puppets you can command and control as you please, perhaps that day you will realize all the mistakes you have made and all that you've lost for your greater good." Without waiting for an answer, Severus left the office, and a sad thrill from Fawkes sounded through the office. Filius Flitwick shook his head in disgust and stepped forward. "My resignation. My king wants nothing to do with Hogwarts as long as you are its headmaster. It's his opinion that a man that leaves children behind to be abused and abandoned shouldn't be in charge of a school full of children." Nothing what Albus said could convince his to stay, and in less than 30 minutes Albus had lost 2 important members of his staff. He missed not only 2 heads of houses but also a potions master that could teach and brew for the hospital wing, and that is not even to mention all the side clubs Filius mentored in his free time. Albus moaned. He had so much to do, and now he had to go down to greet the students for a new year at Hogwarts. He popped a lemon drop in his mouth, and with a sad look at Fawkes, who still ignored him, he made his way to the Great Hall and sat down. It had never taken him so much strength to keep his friendly smile as the students walked in, and he noticed that the entire Slytherin table was empty. A quarter of the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff table were absent. When he looked at the Gryffindor table he was shocked. Even the Weasleys were absent. What was going on? He didn't have to wait long. Instead of Minerva walking in with the first years to be sorted, the entire board of governors walked in with the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, followed by Amelia Bones and a couple of other ministry employees, and they were followed by a group of angry parents with Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley leading. "Mr. Dumbledore." Cornelius Fudge started a little nervous but determined. "We're here to relieve you of your duties as headmaster, chief warlock of the Wizengamot and supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards." Albus paled and tried to convince them all that this was just a slight misunderstanding, and if they could follow him to his office all would be sorted out quickly. Lucius Malfoy gave a cold laugh. "You are mistaken. We told the minister that we would not allow our children to attend Hogwarts as long as you are its headmaster. The Wizengamot voted you out this morning in an emergency session, and the ICW was already gathering evidence as certain laws have been passed in the last decades that go against everything the ICW stands for, and you let them pass." Amelia Bones stepped forward. "As of now, everything you did since and including your defeat of Gellert Grindelwald will be under investigation. Every decision and law you have passed will be looked over. This includes all the seat you unrightfully used in the Wizengamot. You have until this morning to leave Hogwarts." Albus Dumbledore shook his head. "No, this cannot be happening. This is all a big misunderstanding. Hogwarts won't survive the war without me." "What war?" Amelia Bones asked with a raised eyebrow. "You know who was defeated 10 years ago." Albus nodded. "Yes, defeated but not killed, and he will return someday." "Well, when that day comes we will cross that bridge then," Cornelius Fudge said. "Today we are here to relieve you of your duties." "Who will take over as headmaster?" "My deputy," Albus asked hopefully. "No, she is under investigation herself as she was involved in the abandonment of Mr. Potter at Privet Drive No. 4. The ICW will send people over to help set things straight and back under control," Amelia Bones replied. Albus Dumbledore looked at the people who wanted him all gone, and he knew that he wouldn't win if he tried to fight them, and tried to stay so with a sad and disappointed look. He said, "I will get to my office and pack my belongings, but in the end you will all see that this has been a great misunderstanding. Amelia just shook her head. Shacklebolt, don't let him out of your sight and make sure that he doesn't take anything with him that doesn't belong to him. Kingsley Shacklebolt nodded and followed a defeated Albus Dumbledore out of the Great Hall. Harry was working with Dobby on a huge pot of stew. He wanted to make a meal for the hard-working goblins as the walls of his new home almost rose out of the ground while he watched, and he was more than impressed. He had tried to agree with the goblins that it was too big and way too much, but they all refused to listen to the little Dragon King, as they called him, as their king had given his orders personally to them, and they didn't want to lose their head by not listening to him, so they built the little Dragon King his new home, what became a huge building. Harry had watched in disbelief how they built him a whole castle. He had once seen on the television the home of Queen Elizabeth, and what the goblins were building was way bigger than the palace he had seen, and he couldn't understand why they were doing this for him. That the goblins wanted to give him a home fit for his family in return for letting them live above ground went lost on him. Dobby, what do you think would be better for dessert, apple pie or strawberry ice cream? It's still hot, so some ice cream to cool down would be nice. The house elf thought it over for a moment. We could do both. We have the time and enough ingredients, sir. Harry smiled. You're amazing, Dobby. I keep forgetting that I don't have to do it all by myself. Dobby smiled. Dobby isn't used to working with a master, as Master Harry said last night. Together we learn, and Dobby loves working for and with his new master Dragon King. Harry. Harry laughed. It's still just Harry, but we will do both. I hope Charlie's mom likes it. His mom's cooking is. Dobby smiled reassuringly. Master is a great cook and many house elves would be jealous. Master Harry's friend's mother, brother and sister will like the food we make. Harry sighs. I hope so. I never made food for anyone besides myself and my cubs. Charlie stayed for dinner a couple of times, but it's still different. I still don't know what I was thinking when I was inviting all those people over for dinner. He never mentioned that he used to cook for his relatives while he could never eat from the food he had made, simply because he never thought about his life before the valley as it was in the past, where it should be. You have nothing to worry about, Master Harry, sir. We have prepared enough for everyone, and Dobby is betting everyone loves Master Harry's stew. Harry smiled as he stirred through the stew, and it smelled delicious. He was really excited for tonight. Hello, dear. My name is Molly Weasley. Thank you for inviting us for dinner. Molly Weasley said, smiling as she introduced herself to the little boy that invited her and her children for dinner. Harry smiled a little shyly but accepted the hug the woman gave him. It is my pleasure, ma'am. Molly smiled. Please call me Molly, and I wanted to thank you for the lovely gift you sent me. My husband and children arranged to let it be made into this wonderful cloak, and I have to admit it is one of my dearest possessions. And she stroked the cloak lovingly. Harry's cheeks flushed bright red at the praise and compliments. He never thought she would love it so much. He had hoped she would like it, but he never thought she would love it. Well, it was the least I could do after you send me those wonderful recipes. I totally love the cocoa you send me. I just love the chocolate milk you recommended I should make. My mom says I'm a chocolate-holic. Molly, Bill and Charlie laughed while Ginny looked confused. Yeah, my mom thought it to be funny too, but I don't really understand it, Harry said with a frown. Molly smiled. When you are older you will understand the joke. That's what my mom said, and she said she hoped it will be more than just a few years before I understand the joke. This resulted in another laugh from the elder Weasleys. Please introduce me to your mother. She has to be amazing with a child as yourself and such humor, Molly said, still smiling. You know my mom is a dragon? I know, dear. Molly answered kindly. And you have no problem with that? Molly smiled as she looked at the child in front of her, and her heart melted, and from that moment on she knew she had 8 children and nobody could tell her otherwise. Do you have a problem with your mother being a dragon? No, of course not. She is my mom, Harry said firmly. Molly smiled. Then I would love to meet your mother, as I said before. Happily smiling, Harry led them to the valley, where he had made a place for everyone to sit around a campfire to chat and eat. When he introduced his mother to Molly, it was the start of a friendship between the two mothers. Even though they spoke in different languages or were totally different species, it didn't matter. Their love for their children was enough. A couple of hours later, everyone was sitting happily enjoying the warm summer evening with a filled belly and newly met people. Molly was chatting with King Ragnuk's wife. Raina was pregnant, and her child would be the first goblin child to be born underneath the sun, or the moon. It really depended on when. Raina went into labor and both women were sharing stories about their pregnancies and children, as this would be Raina's third child, and they soon noticed that goblin children weren't so different from human or Wixen children. Ginny, who had been shy and a little embarrassing at first, quickly came around after a stern talk from Charlie, who told she should forget about the boy who lived and all the stories she had heard growing up. If she kept going the way she was going, she would quickly lose any chance to so much as have friendship with the boy. Not that Harry had much time for her, as he divided his attention between serving dinner with the help of Dobby and talking with his guests. At first she had been a little sad, as she was used to getting all the attention at home, and she soon realized she was far from the most important person around the campfire. It was when she felt the tears behind her eyes as her family's attention was everywhere but on her that she felt something push behind her back, and with a soft yelp, she fell into a soft, furry pillow, and before she realized what happened she was wrapped in two huge soft arms. When she looked up, she saw that she was being hugged by one of the brown bears that were with Harry. Ginny giggled as the bear snuggled his wet nose against her cheeks, and before she knew it, she was enjoying the evening while the bear kept her company and cuddled with her, and she was more than happy to share her meal with her new friend. And when the adults talked deep into the night, it didn't bother her. She didn't behave as a spoiled little girl, something her mother and brothers has been afraid of. Instead, she enjoyed herself in the company of an incredibly cuddly bear. She never realized that she had fallen asleep while cuddling with the bear. She never noticed that her brother carried her to her bed, where her mother tucked her in with a kiss on her head. That night Ginny's dreams weren't filled with a dark-haired boy and hopes she would marry him, but with a brown bear who played with her on the soft green grass and picked apples, which they shared together. And when she woke up that morning, all thoughts about the boy who lived had been forgotten. No, all she wanted was a life filled with animals, and where she once wished she could marry Harry Potter, she now wished she would find a bear as wonderful as Teddy, the bear that had cuddled with her and made her feel special, warm and safe. Sometimes a hug was all it took to change a future. ****** Chapter End Notes A.N. Ginny is not going to be a big part of this story, I think, but you never know for sure what characters decide to do. But as there are so much Ginny bashing stories, I wanted to show the side of Ginny where she could be cool, a friend, and not the head over heels in love teenage girl with the boy she grew up reading about. A child crush is what it was, is, and what it is supposed to be. See you next time. Open Mouth Smile Chapter 6 Chapter Notes Firework Sparkler Happy New Year everyone, Sparkler Firework. With the start of 2024 and my posting streak, celebrating special days like my birthday and Christmas, I have no other choice than continue this new tradition into the new year. Tongue out party popper, so here is a brand new chapter to start this new year with something good. Open mouth smile firework happy reading and all the best wishes for the new year. Purple heart. Big hug smiling face with open hands LadyRava PS. I was going to post this when I woke up, but why wait? So what the hell, here is a new chapter in the middle of the night while the fireworks are driving my dog in a crazy barking frenzy and giving me a headache. So happy new year and cheers. Tumbler glass cold sweat smile. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 6. Arthur Weasley sighs as he sat down at one of the wooden chairs at the kitchen table. It had been a long and tiring day. Normally the first day of September, where his children left to board the Hogwarts Express, was an easy day where he could leave early. It all had started early, even before the children had woken up, that he got an owl from the ministry with an urgent message to get there as soon as possible. He didn't have to wake up his wife, as she was already up and making coffee for him, after she had reassured him that she was perfectly capable of taking the kids to the station herself, and after that she would take the portkey to Romania. He had kissed her goodbye, and after a promise that he would contact Head later that evening, he took the Flo to the ministry, where Lucius Malfoy of all people was waiting for him. Next to the entrance of the Flo had looked at the tall blonde man who always had looked down on him and treated him with contempt, but as he patted the soot of his robes he looked better at the man, and to his shock none of the contempt was seen on the man's face. Behind the mask he saw remorse, and it confused the hell out of him, so as politely as he could he had said, "What can I do for you, Lord Malfoy?" Lucius Malfoy seemed to take a deep breath before he said, "If it isn't inconvenient, I would like a moment of your time, Lord Weasley." That had confused Arthur even more, as it was because of that man's ancestors that he wasn't a lord and never moved up in rank in the ministry. Was this all to rub it in a little more? Was this all to humiliate him? Lucius Malfoy saw the look on Arthur's face and quickly added, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I still ask you for a couple of minutes of your time." Arthur shook his head and he wasn't sure why, but he couldn't refuse the man in front of him, so with a sharp nod accepted, and he followed Lucius Malfoy to one of the smaller meeting rooms, locked the door and put on some privacy charms. They sat down at the table and Arthur just waited, as it was Lucius who had wanted to talk with him, and after a couple of awkward moments Lucius strengthened his shoulders and looked Arthur in his eyes. "I'm not really sure how to start," Lucius said, a little hesitant. Arthur smiled gently. "Why don't you start at the beginning?" "All right," Lucius said, and after a moment thought he did start at the beginning. 250 years ago Lucretia Malfoy fell in love with Hendrik Weasley. As you know, this is where our blood feud starts. Arthur nodded grimly and Lucius continued. After a period of courting and a short engagement, the day of their wedding was planned. The day before her wedding, Lucretia decided that she wanted to pick some flowers for her wedding, and as she had done 1,000 times, she took her little basket and took off. When she didn't return home when it was time for dinner and she wasn't there, a group of men started to search for her, and her fiancé was sent a message. When Lucretia was found, she was attacked brutally, and not even the best healers of that time could help her. "Yes, and your family blamed my ancestor for the attack, as some witness had seen a bloodied red-haired man run away from the scene." Arthur snapped. "Your family took everything we had, our home, our money, our lands and lordship. And we were wrong." Lucius interrupted, and Arthur looked dumbstruck and disbelieving at the man in front of him. They knew they were wrong. It was a couple of weeks later that a man was captured raping a woman. He was interrogated, and after some convincing he confessed his crimes, including the attack on Lucretia Malfoy. The family was soon notified, but before the story could spread, my ancestors obliterated the people who knew the truth and took the real perpetrator, who was tortured and killed. "They knew the truth all along?" Arthur said, angry and in shock. Lucius nodded sadly. "They knew, and they decided that it would be better if the truth never came out, as they didn't want to return the lands and money." "Why tell me now?" Arthur asked suspicions, and he crossed his arms in front of him as he leaned back in his chair. "Because I'm finally able. My father and grandfather were both followers of the Dark Lord. I was born and raised with their beliefs, and it was only when I met Narcissa at Hogwarts and she showed me another side, that I started thinking for myself. I looked into my family's history and learned the truth about our blood feud, but there was nothing I could do. Everything I did was watched. I could only speak to people they allowed, make friends they approved, and I learned from a young age that protesting and disagreeing ends with pain. The only time I rebelled was when I eloped with Narcissa instead of marrying her sister Bellatrix, who instead married Lestrange. I remember reading in the paper that you married in secret, but with everything that was going on at that time, it wasn't a big deal or something people really paid attention to." Lucius nodded in agreement. "Indeed, but my father and grandfather weren't pleased and cursed Narcissa. She would only be able to bear me one heir. If it was a girl, the child would die hours after she was born. We were only allowed to have one son. We lost 2 girls before we got Draco, and after that we could get out of the contract as we had an heir, and my wife didn't have to get pregnant anymore. If something would happen to Draco, we would be forced to do it all over again as our contracts demand." "That is just horrible." Lucius nodded sadly. "Yes, but we are finally free. When the Dark Lord was defeated by Harry Potter, I was still a prisoner of my father and grandfather, and I had a role to play. I needed to protect my wife and son, so nothing really changed. It was only last week that we became free to live our lives as we wished. Last week my father and grandfather both died of dragonpox." "Are your wife and son all right?" Arthur asked, worried, as dragonpox was highly contagious and it had only been a couple of years since there was a potion for the deadly disease. "Yes, they are all right. We all had the potion." "That is a relief." Arthur smiled. "After their deaths," Lucius continued, "I'm truly free to make amends and right the wrongs my family has done. To start with you. I know money does not make everything right, but I put the money my ancestors took in a vault at Gringotts in your name with interest. The Weasley family are back on the list of the 28 sacred pure blood families. Your lordship is reinstated, including your seats in the Wizengamot. I'm still looking into the lands that have been taken, and they will be returned or paid for." He handed Arthur the papers, who looked disbelieving at what was in front of him. "Why?" "Because I can make the beginnings of a new start, even though it's in your right as Lord Weasley to start a blood feud with the House Malfoy. With the Dark Lord gone and the Dragon King who has been found, a new future is starting, and this time the Malfoy family will be a name to be proud of as it fights for a better future." Arthur looked at the man, and the honesty that came off the man made him decide, I'm not sure why, but I believe you. If you are truthful about new beginnings, let it start without any blood feuds." Lucius Malfoy looked relieved, and Arthur felt even better about his choice, but if he thought that Lucius Malfoy had said everything he wanted, he was sorely mistaken. Lucius had explained the emergency Wizengamot meeting that morning and how they would vote before lunch about the future of the headmaster of Hogwarts. Lucius had shown him the evidence of what Albus Dumbledore had done, how he had abandoned a baby in the middle of the night on a doorstep, and the lies he told about Harry Potter. They talked for as long as they could. And just moments before the vote was taken, they had taken their seats and Arthur was voted in and introduced as Lord Weasley. The decision to remove Albus Dumbledore as headmaster was quickly made, and they would try to do that before the children arrived. The ICW was notified and would send people over to help. They had made their trip to Hogwarts, and after Albus Dumbledore had been removed as headmaster and the situation had calmed down a little, they had made sure that all the students found their way to Hogwarts, and the sorting and openings feast would be delayed until the next morning. When Arthur was on his way back to the ministry after he had explained some things to his sons, including the end of the blood feud, and wished them a good year, when Lucius Malfoy found him again. Lucius explained more about what had been given back to the Weasley family, and that's when Lucius hesitantly asked if Arthur was willing to take over 2 house elves. The house elves that had been originally taken had died a long time age elf, and here young newborn remained from that line of elves, as her mate had been recently killed by his mother. His mother hated house elves and abused them. She only accepted Malfoy elves, and the others were vermin in her eyes. He already freed Dobby to a new master, but wanted Sunny and her baby to return to the Weasley family. Arthur wasn't against house elves, he was against abusing them, and he remembered all too well how Molly had sometimes wished they could afford a house elf to help her with the never-ending pile of laundry and the children running havoc. After some thought, he agreed to take the elves, and Lucius promised him to send them over that night. The rest of the day had kept him running around the ministry, so when he finally came home to a way too silent and empty house, he was a little happy that he wouldn't be alone for too long, as the house elves would arrive soon. He decided to empty out the storage cabinet and make it a little room for the elf and her baby. If he worked a little bit harder and through the night, he could build the storage closet Molly always wanted, but he never had the time to build, or he just forgot about it. To be honest, before she came home from her trip to Romania, he smiled. So many things had changed. He never thought he would stand against Albus Dumbledore, and if you told him a week ago that he was happy to be invited to dinner by Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy when Molly had returned, he would have told you that you were crazy and perhaps had been hexed. When Arthur went to sleep that night after he had bonded and showed Sunny her new sleeping place, he felt a little bit lonely, as he couldn't remember the last time he slept alone, but he had hope for the future. He had hope for his family, and things started to get better, not only for them but for the whole magical world. Harry had been working with the dragon healers on the baby of the Chinese Firebolt. The little dragon would never be able to fly long distances, but as far as they could tell, he would be able to fly, and that was what's most important. His dinner party last night had lasted a little longer than he had thought, but it had been one of the best evenings of his life. He really liked Charlie's mother, and he was more than happy that she had accepted him, his mother and his cubs, as he had been a little worried about that. When he got back to his cave after he had admired what would soon be his new house, he still couldn't believe it, as the building was huge. It was larger than anything he could imagine. At first he had been doubtful that the goblins would build him really a house big enough that it could fit his mother, but as he watched the constructions going on, he realized it would be big enough for multiple dragons, including his mom and cubs. He saw a young girl with long blonde hair was braiding flowers into his cub's hair. "Hi, Luna, wasn't it?" Harry asked as he walked towards them. Tiny left his side to sniff on the flowers in her brother's fur. "Hello, Dragon King. Yes, my name is Luna, Luna Lovegood." Harry smiled. "Just Harry, please. And do you want something to drink? I see you have been very busy. The cubs look great." Luna smiled. "Yes, please. Some water would be nice. I came to talk to you, but when you were not here, I decided to wait with your lovely bears, and I started grooming them with my fingers." The lighter bear soon took off and came back with a bag filled with grooming supplies. "I was just finishing up with some lovely smelling flowers." Harry grinned. "Yeah, they know what they want and they make sure to get it. They're a little bit spoiled." "There is nothing wrong with being a little bit spoiled. My daddy loves to spoil me, but he doesn't want me to turn into a spoiled little brat." Harry laughed and prepared them something to drink and some fruit to nibble on while Luna told him why she wanted to talk with him. She was going to write her first article for the Quibbler, which was a magazine her father owned, and she wanted to write a piece about his mother as she was really intrigued by the fact that she was still in contact with her daughters and that she had only ever hatched daughters. Harry was more than happy to answer all her questions and even took her to his mom to translate some questions and answers for her, and when her father picked her up that evening she was smiling, and for the first time since her mother died she allowed herself to be really a part of the world again with all the endless possibilities. Possibilities she saw flashes off and which had scared her. It had scared her enough to close herself off for her gifts as she couldn't save her mother, but today being with Harry and his family made her believe in the future again. Harry of course had no clue what he had done for the little girl as he waved her good night after inviting her over whenever she wanted. He was just happy that he, maybe, made a new friend. He cooed over how lovely his cubs looked with the flower braided in their furs. "Dobby, do you need anything before we go to sleep?" Dobby shook his head, which made his bat-like ears flop up and down. "No, thank you, Master Harry. Dobby has everything he needs." Harry smiled at the house elf, who looked so much better. He had taken one of the deer hides Harry had in storage and made himself some pants and a shirt that looked way better than his old and dirty pillowcase. He watched as the elf put the dagger Harry had gifted him next to his pillow before the elf crawled into the little nest he had made for himself. He had given the elf the small dagger he had made in one of his long winters in the cave with not much to do. He always carried a small knife and dagger with him. Most of the time he used it for his daily chores, but once or twice he had used it to protect himself. "All right, sleep well," Harry said as he laid down next to Tiny. Her big brothers were outside enjoying the fresh air and the coolness of the night. "Sweet dreams, Master Harry," Dobby said before he turned off the torches on the wall with a snap of his fingers, and the only light was the fire burning at the entrance of the cave. When Molly Weasley came home after her trip to Romania, she was in quite the shock with all the changes her humble home had gone through. When she stepped into the kitchen, she not only found her husband sitting at the kitchen table, but he was happily chatting with Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy. At first she thought someone had bewitched her, as this couldn't be real, but as she kept blinking her eyes nothing changed and the couple stayed at her kitchen table. "Molly," Arthur said happily, and he stood up to hug and kiss his still thunderstruck wife. "It's good to have you back, and even though a lot has changed while you were gone, the house has been too empty without you." Molly smiled, and she couldn't help but hug and kiss her husband back. Even if her whole world had turned upside down with the Malfoy couple sitting at her kitchen table, some things stayed the same, such as the love she and her husband held for each other. Arthur took her cloak and bag and put it away. "Molly, please sit down and let Sunny make you a cup of tea." Arthur guides her to a chair. "Sunny?" she asked, a little confused. When a small house elf with a baby wrapped against her chest introduced herself as Sunny and handed her a cup of tea, was it that Molly was told the whole story of the last few days. She had known, of course, of the lies Albus Dumbledore had told about Harry, but that the Ministry together with the ICW had removed him from all his positions of power shocked her. Molly had always been one of the strongest supporters the headmaster had. She thought the man could do no wrong, and the first cracks in her trust had started when the world had found out about Harry Potter. She still had hoped that it all had been a huge mistake, but now, seeing all the facts for herself and Harry had told her his story, she knew something was wrong, and she was happy her children were no longer under his care. "So what are we doing now?" She got the whole story. Lucius Malfoy smiled. "Now we make sure that Harry Potter is left alone to be with his family. The Goblins already made sure he will soon be living in a proper house instead of a cave. The valley will be warded." "And his education? He can barely read," Molly asked, worried. "Multiple plans have been set into motion, and we are waiting for the final results, and after we talk with Mr. Potter to see if he agrees with the arrangements we have made. Our goal is to teach and protect him so that if he will be our king someday, he has all the information and tools to be the best king he can be." Narcissa spoke softly. "We have seen our world plunged into darkness, and it will be swallowed whole if we don't change and protect our future, protect our children. If and when the Dark Lord returns, we need to be united. We can't let it go as far as it did last time. We lost too much to go through war again and survive as a community and country," Lucius said seriously. "And you took the first step in preventing this as soon as you could," Arthur said gently. "You reached out to me as soon as you were free from your father and grandfather to make amends and set things right." Lucius nodded. I never thought we would share a table in friendship, or that we would ever be on such good terms that I would be happy to be invited over to your home." Molly smiled. "Well, I would never have thought that you'd wanted to visit our humble home or take our hand in friendship, not that we ever extended one, as I thought we had different beliefs and ideals. I see now that those were not your thoughts or views, and that a lot of choices you made in the past were forced upon you. We have seen you both for the people you were, and we are both more than happy to let the past in the past." Molly hugged her husband before she stood up to get them all some refreshments, but was soon sent back to the table with a stern look from Sunny. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. "What do you want us to do with it?" Griphook asked the stunned boy in front of him. "I'm not sure," Harry stammered as he looked at the hundreds and hundreds of bags filled with letters, packages and other things people had sent him in the last decade. Albus Dumbledore had placed a mail ward in him, and all the mail had been collected and stored in a room at Hogwarts. It had been recently found, and all the mail had been sent to him with an apology. "If King Harry doesn't mind Dobby speaking," Dobby said hesitantly while he pulled on his ear. Harry gently helped the elf let go of his large ear and said, "You can always speak your mind. You are not to hurt yourself any longer. Take a deep breath and then tell me what it is you wanted to say." Dobby did as he was told and gave a little smile. Dobby knows that Miss Luna is teaching Master Harry to read, and all those letters require a lot of writing and reading, something King Harry isn't used to. Not that he is not making great progress. The last part was quickly added, and when the elf saw that he had not offended his master in any way, he went on. "Dobby knows of a free house elf whose former job was to answer letters for her master. Her master died without an heir, and she had no other choice than to become a free elf. You think that she would want to read through all those letters for me?" Dobby nodded enthusiastically, and his big ears flopped up and down. "Oh yes, she would love to have a master and read and answer them for you, King Harry, sir." "What do you think?" Harry asked Griphook, as the goblin had provided him multiple times with advice that proved to be invaluable. "I think your elf had the right idea. It would take too much of your time to read through all of them even without replying to them, as it seems to be your intention," Griphook said after a moment's thought. "It wouldn't take too much time to prepare one of the rooms for the elf to use and store all the mail. Dobby could help with that." "All right, but first we have to make sure she wants to work for me. So Dobby, you go and invite her back here where we can explain everything, and if she agrees she can help prepare her own room and workspace, as we have no idea how she likes to work." Griphook gave a nod in approval, and that seemed enough for Dobby, who popped away to talk with the elf. Griphook told him that he would put all the bags away while they waited for Dobby to return, which gave Harry the time to check up on Bella, as Dobby had taken it upon himself to take care of the cow, and there was nothing left to do than pat and cuddle the cow. His life had changed so much, and he wasn't sure if he liked it or not. Sometimes everything inside him screamed to just ask his mom to chase everyone away, so the peace and quiet could return to their valley, but no matter how much he wanted to, that he never would, as the first children of the Goblin Nation had visited the valley, and their laughter had echoed through the valley and made everyone smile. His new home was almost finished, and he still couldn't believe that that huge building would be his home. It felt surreal, and again he wasn't sure how he felt about it. He really didn't want to be ungrateful, but if he was really honest, all the changes and people, it scared him, and he wasn't sure how to respond to it all. He was glad that he had his mother and cubs, and he would have been lost without them. Tiny barely left his side before the humans had invaded their valley, but now she was always in touching distance. His other cubs were always close by, and he felt much better when he left the cave that Shadow stayed to protect their home. Not that the bear really minded, as he did not like the hot summer weather. Hunter and Teddy strolled around. They could be found at his mother's side or next to the small cabin the goblins were stationed to protect the entrance and path through the forest to the valley, although Teddy could be found a lot of times at Charlie's side, much to Charlie's amusement. Harry was just packing some of his herbs and spices into boxes. He was already slowly packing up his things, as Griphook had told him that his new home would be ready in just a couple of days, and he didn't want to come over as ungrateful by not being ready to move. But he felt a knot inside his stomach as he packed away his things, and his home started to feel less and less like home. It was when he packed the hide of the bear that had attacked him and had given him his cubs that he burst out in tears. Tears streamed down his cheeks and wetted Tiny's fur as she immediately wrapped up the boy in a hug when the first tear had escaped him. His sadness and panic was felt by his family. Ruby had been lying in the sun before she abruptly woke up and flew to the cave to comfort her child. Teddy and Hunter had been with Charlie, Bill and Griphook and their sudden move and run back to the valley made them follow the animals. When they arrived at the cave they could hear a child crying, and after some concerned looks it was quietly agreed that Charlie would go inside the cave to take a look as he knew the boy best. "Hey, Harry, are you all right? May I come in?" Charlie asked softly as he tried to look into the cave, but Ruby was blocking the entrance with her huge body. The only thing he heard was a desperate crying. Everyone knew how a child could cry when it bruised its knee or wanted something. He knew all about it growing up with all his siblings, but never had he heard one of them sound so incredibly sad and desperate. Harry sounded as if the world was torn in pieces. "Harry, what is going on? Are you hurt?" Charlie took a deep breath and slowly put his hand on the large dragon like one would do when walking behind a horse, and walked forwards. It was dark in the cave, and with a small flick of his wand the torches on the wall flickered and he could see a pile of bears surrounded by the large body of a dragon. This was a family comforting and taking care of one of its members. "Harry, are you hurt?" Sex to the pile of bears, and Teddy gave him a sad look. It took a couple of minutes, but to Charlie's immense relief the pile of bears moved. Teddy took place behind him while Shadow and Hunter just moved a little, and that's when Charlie finally saw the boy wrapped in the soft arms of Tiny, who held him close to her chest. "What happened? Is there something I can do?" Charlie asked. I'm sorry," was finally heard through the sobs. "I didn't mean to be ungrateful." "What do you mean? You aren't ungrateful. I'm scared to leave my home. The new house is so big." "Oh, Harry, you aren't ungrateful to be scared to move. This has been your home for so long. Everyone would be scared to move. When my mother was pregnant with Fred and George, they built the first of what would be many extensions to our home. I got a new room. I got to decorate how I liked it, and I loved my new room. But when the first night came for me to sleep in my new room, I was scared. Everything was different, and it didn't even smell like my old room." "Then what happened?" Charlie smiled as he could hear the sobs slowing down as Harry was listening to his story. "Then my big brother Bill told me that he found it a little scary too sleeping in his new room. So that night we slept together in my room and the next in his until we both felt comfortable in our new rooms." He smiled when a messy black-haired boy with puffy red eyes came visible. "We were scared and we moved rooms in our home. You're moved into an entire new home, and that isn't the only change in your life in a short period of time. You have gone through a lot." "I hate feeling scared," Harry said softly through his shuddered breath. "We all do. And it's all those people. I don't mind the goblins, as they stay to themselves most of the time and have their own part of the valley. But all those other people who want to talk with me and don't listen when I ask them to leave. Last time they tried to steal my stuff, and they keep trying to touch me, and I don't have enough food to last us through winter, and I don't have the time to do all my chores, and the fruits are getting bad and I don't have the time to pick them. And those humans are always so loud, and I'm just really tired." "Oh, Harry," Charlie felt his heart breaking. "I'm so sorry that we didn't see this for ourselves. I'm going to make sure that you get some free time from all those humans. I will make sure that Griphook closes the valley for the foreseeable future." "Not for the goblin children," Charlie smiled. "No, not for the children, but for everyone who wants something from you. We will make a schedule. We install visiting hours or something. First we are helping you move into your new home and get comfortable and settled. As for your winter storage, you don't have to do everything alone. We will help you, and you don't have to live entirely off the forest anymore. It isn't bad to buy food or ingredients. We told you. You don't have to worry about money." "I can buy food." "Sure you can," Charlie said happily. "I bet Dobby would love to help you get groceries. Most house elves are used to getting groceries and making sure everything is in storage." The look of relief and the words following made Charlie's heart break. "I was so scared I couldn't feed everyone through winter. It is always my biggest concerns, but with Dobby and possible the new elf and all the people visiting constantly, it is just too many mouths. I can't feed them all. It was hard enough this summer, and it took most of my supplies that normally would get me through the winter. I don't think I've had a glass of milk from Bella in weeks. Because they wrote about her in your stupid newspaper, and now everyone wants a glass of milk." Charlie smiled. "I'm going to teach you how to say no. You should not give everything away. You need to take care of yourself first." Harry sighs. "I don't want them to get mad at me." "You can say yes to everything. Give them everything you have, and there will still be people who don't like you or be mad at you. You can't please the whole world. You and your family come first. everything else is second. Harry gave a hesitant nod, but it was enough for Charlie, who smiled. We get there, but for now go splash some water in your face and I'm going to make you some chocolate milk and then we go together and see your new home so you get more comfortable. A small smile formed after one last hug. Tiny let him go out of her warm embrace. On his way outside, his mom nuzzled him with her snout. You have found a good friend, she said before she flew back to her spot in the valley. Asterisk 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 chapter endnotes. When the next chapter will be posted, I have no idea, but it will take a little longer than it have been with the other chapters. Open mouth smile. Chapter 7 chapter notes. Happy reading. Open book big hug. Smiling face with open hands. LadyRava. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 7. Harry woke up and felt excited. Today would be the day his cubs and mother would move into their new home. In the last week, Griphook had made sure no one entered the valley without an invitation, which had given Harry the peace and quiet that he so desperately needed. Charlie had made sure that he got to know his new home before he moved in. He had helped him decide what room would be his bedroom or where he wanted to prepare his furs and hides. The kitchen had been a dream coming through. It was large, open, and had everything he could dream of, and when he looked outside the window he looked over the valley where he could see his mother and her daughters sousing in the sun. It was a perfect view. He had pointed to a couple of rooms that he wanted to be turned into little apartments for the house elves, as he wanted them to have a place for themselves. They didn't have to share. They deserved a home too, and if they wanted to start a family they should have the space. That Dobby and Quilly were more than overwhelmed was an understatement. Quilly had been more than happy to work for Harry and sort through his mail, so they had bonded quickly, and she had started her job. She had never thought her new master would be so kind or thoughtful as he took care of them, and not because it was his job as their master, but because he had adopted them into his strange but loving family. After he ate breakfast made by Dobby, he took one last look around the cave. He had changed it, and it was now just a cave with a few supplies if he ever needed them. The cave would soon lead to a tunnel through the mountain where the goblins would build a large enough cave with multiple nesting spots for Ruby and her daughters, who had made their wishes known to the goblins, who were more than happy to make those wishes come through. That the goblins would go above and beyond their wishes and would make the cave into a small paradise for dragons was a story for later. After he put away his dishes he whistled for Bella. Charlie had told him that the goblins had built him a large barn and he would see it when he moved Bella into her new stable, so he had milked her one last time in her old stable just for old time's sake, and now with his last things packed he was ready to leave. Even though he knew he wasn't leaving the valley, it was still strange walking away from the cave with his cubs and Bella. He had walked this path 1,000 times, but this time it was different. When he came to the newly built barn attached to his home, he was greeted by not only Griphook and Charlie as he expected, but also King Ragnuk and his mate Raina, Bill, Xenophilius, Lovegood and Luna. Good morning. I didn't expect so many people. King Ragnuk laughed. Young king, it is our honor to welcome you to your new home. It is our wish that you live a long and happy life between these walls. Thank you, Harry said, smiling. He had no clue what to say. After all, they built him a whole house. Bill and Charlie pushed open the 2 wooden doors in King Ray's arm and took him inside. It was a beautiful barn with large stables leading to a pasture where the animals could graze. As you can see, we gave Bella some friends to graze with. Harry smiled as he saw the cows. One was red, another was entirely black, while the third was black and white like Bella. They are amazing, and I'll bet they're going to be best friends. He let Bella go after a couple of pats and encouragement. She walked towards the other cows and greeted them gently, and then they started grazing together. We also provide you with a few more chickens and make sure their pen is safe for predators. Bill told me how you've lost a couple of chickens before you managed to protect them with your magic. Yeah, but a pen is much safer. Protecting them with my magic costs a lot of energy. This is really great, Harry said excitedly as he looked over at the chickens and patted them. I'm glad you approved, King Ragnuk said happily. We also made sure that the animals that have been gifted to you over the years, and who found shelter in the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts, are returned. He pointed to a couple of stables. You took them from their home? Harry asked in shock. King Ragnuk shook his head. No, those animals weren't taken care of. They weren't supposed to live in the forest all by themselves. They were used to humans who took care of them. They have been alone and abandoned. We found them, healed them and brought them here, home where they belong. I'm sorry, Harry mumbled. No harm done, young king. The stables on your left are now the home of a hippogriff. Couple and their young. The stable in the shadows is occupied by a young thestral that has been kicked out by the herd that belongs to Hogwarts, and in the last stable you find a unicorn and a foal. She made it pretty clear that she wanted to come along. She is taking care of the foal even though it isn't hers and she is already pregnant. Wow. Harry said, stunned as he looked at the beautiful unicorn and the golden foal. They're so beautiful. Well, if they all wanted to stay and call this home, who am I to refuse them? Harry said with a smile. This will add a lot more work on your already way to heavy workload, King Ragnuk said, and then he opened a door to a small office. So let me introduce you to Puck and Pip. They will help you with the animals, your gardens and greenhouses. Two young house elves, almost bouncing with excitement, were more than happy to bond with their Dragon King, and they promised they would take care of all the animals. After the introduction of his two new house elves, King Ragnuk led them to another part of the barn. This place is stocked with everything you could possibly need while healing the sick animals and creatures that seems to find you. Also in the back is enough place for you to wash and groom your bears or mother and big sisters. King Ragnuk said with a wink. In the last few weeks he had become more than familiar with the pampering and grooming the boys seems to give the animals. Oh, wow. Harry said, amazed. This is amazing. It's big enough to easily wash up Mom. It is way better to wash itchy scales before I oil them. And with the lights I can even remove stuff between their teeth or paws when it's dark. This will help me so much. Harry looked enthusiastic at all the details, and he almost wanted to call for his mom so he could test everything out for himself. I'm glad you approve. King Ragnuk said, very pleased with himself and his goblins who had built this for the young Dragon King. King Ragnuk showed him the rest of the huge barn, the free stables for possible new animals, the pastures where the animals could roam freely, and with the charms and wards that had been added to the stables and the valley, no animal would ever come to harm or in other words became a dragon snack while grazing or strolling around. The house, which was definitely a castle, was big enough for Ruby to enter. She could not go to any upper floors, but the entire downstairs floor was made so she could walk freely and be with her son. The living room with the huge fireplace and soft sofas and seats was a perfect place for the family to just be together like a family. In every room was a place for his mother and cubs to lay down. His bedroom was on the second floor, and his mother could reach through the balcony inside his room and could lay her head on top of his bed if she wanted to be extra close, and it was something Harry just loved. Attached to his bedroom he had a huge bathroom with a bath big enough for him and his 4 cubs to bathe in together. The shower was lovely, and after a quick explanation he remembered, a little embarrassed, how the toilet was used. The entire 3rd floor was for anything he could think of and more, from guest rooms to a library, and he couldn't even read. It had a classroom, a potions laboratory, and a lot of empty rooms that would be filled over time. The 4th floor was an open space that led to the roof, which had been made into a garden, and his mother could easily land there. It would soon become her favorite spot as she could oversee the entire valley. Young King, I will leave you to settle in your new home, King Ragnuk said when they had made their way down again. Harry thanked him for like the 100th time in the last couple of hours, and after King Ragnuk had promised to come over for dinner next week, Harry waved them goodbye in front of the door of his new home, one hand waving and the other as always on Tiny's soft, fury head and a huge smile on his face. He turned around and saw Charlie and Bill smiling as they had promised to stay for the night, just like they had done for each other when they had moved rooms all those years ago. They had lost Xenophilius at the beginning of the tour when King Ragnuk had showed them the barn, and Luna had decided to stay on the roof with Ruby, both enjoying the last of the sun that day. So, welcome to my new home. Charlie laughed. Thanks. Did you have a name for it? A name? Harry frowned. Yup. Every home has a name, like ours is the Burrow. Bill explained while they walked back inside to the kitchen, where Harry started preparing tea for them, still brightly smiling as he used his new kitchen utilities and put a plate of chocolate cake in front of them. It was one of the last things he had baked inside the cave in his self-made oven. I'm terrible at coming up with names, Harry sighs. King Harry's castle, Bill said with a grin, and Harry moaned. Charlie laughed. Most people call this valley Ruby's Valley, so you could call it Ruby's Castle if you can't think of anything better. Why castle? Harry asked, confused. Both brothers laughed, because you kept saying how this house is bigger than a castle multiple times a day while it was built. Yeah, because it's true, Harry said, wide-eyed. That made the brothers even laugh harder, and when Luna skipped inside the kitchen saying that Ruby's castle was the perfect home for him, the name was settled. Severus Snape sneered when one of the goblins that had been standing guard led him into a barn. It had taken him weeks and weeks before he finally got a meeting with the brat, and now he was led into a barn. He could hear the cows moo. As they walked closer, he could hear a young voice softly speaking even though he couldn't decipher the words. They turned around a corner and Severus came face to face with an angry bear, and the soft voice said, "Hunter, be nice, we knew he was coming." The bear let them pass, but Severus felt how the bear watched his every move. They walked towards one of the stables, and if it wasn't for all those years perfecting his mask, his mouth would have dropped on the floor. Inside the stable he saw how the brat was helping a unicorn give birth while a young foal stood nearby. Another bear stood at the entrance of the stable. And even though he could watch, he couldn't enter the stable. "Come on, girl. I know it has a LR, I promise it will be over soon." The brat stroked the heavy-breathing mare that was sweating and panting while laboring her foal. It wasn't the first time Severus saw an animal giving birth, but it was definitely the first time he saw the birth of a unicorn guided by a small black-haired boy. It was impossible, and still he saw it happening. It was 20 minutes later that the brat cheered and the foal was breathing and looking around. "Puck, give me some towels," the brat asked, and a house elf handed him a big soft towel, and the brat started drying the foal. It was when the foal stood next to its mother that Severus got annoyed. The magic of the birth had faded and he understood the importance of assisting with the birth, but now the foal was all right and drinking, and the brat still refused to leave and left him waiting. "I really need a change of clothes and a shower. After that I have time to talk with you," the brat said before he left. The goblin grinned and guided him inside the house to a sitting room. He was given tea and biscuits by a house elf before he was left alone with nothing to do but wait and be annoyed. After what felt like hours but was only 30 minutes, the door opened and the brat entered with his 4 bears. "Good, I see that Dobby already provided you with something to drink. Why did you want to speak with me? They promised that you weren't here to convince me to come to Hogwarts?" "I'm not here to convince you to come to Hogwarts. I'm here to offer you my service and expertise as a potion master," Severus replied. "Why?" Severus looked almost stunned at the boy in front of him. Was that really all the brat could say? "Why? Because I believe I could be of use." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Why? You don't seem to like me much, so why did you come here?" Severus thought it over for a while and he wasn't sure what to say and what to reveal. "I'm here because of a promise and mistakes made in the past." Harry sighs. "Really, that is what you are going with? You know I have more to do, so you can tell me the truth and explain why you want to be here when you don't like me." "Because I made a vow to protect you, and because of Dumbledore I almost failed in that vow, which could have cost me my life." "Well, I relieve you from your vow," Harry said, asked, "because it isn't making you happy, even I can see that." Severus almost pinched the bridge of his nose. "That is not how it works." "Oh, you have to stay here because of that vow even though it's making you unhappy." After hearing that Severus pinched the bridge of his nose, "You could say that." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "I bet that the dark magic on your arm isn't really helping you either." "Excuse me?" Harry frowned, confused. "You're not going to tell me that you are not feeling how it is taking your magic little bits at the time?" Severus paled. "It is taking my magic." He had never known that. He knew how the dark mark made it so that the Dark Lord could always summon them, find them or hurt them if he pleased. "Okay, so you didn't know." Before Severus could stop him, Harry pulled up his sleeve to look at the mark. Severus stiffened when the boy suddenly spoke in Parseltongue and a dragon pushed her head through the window. "We can remove it," he said after a moment. Severus looked at the boy, who said he could remove the Dark Lord's mark as if he told them it was sunny outside. "Are you sure?" Harry nodded. "Yup. Mom says it will be painful, but it isn't that difficult. Will it make you happy to have it removed?" "Yes," was the quick reply. Oh, how he had hated the mark. It was one of the worst mistakes he had ever made. That was the last thing Severus knew when the nose of the dragon touched his mark and everything around him went dark. When Severus woke up, he laid on one of the couches and 2 green, concerned-looking eyes stared down at him. "Oh, thank Merlin or whatever, you're awake." Harry sighs, relieved. "What happened?" "Well, your mark is gone, but it had already taken so much of your magic, and without the mark it became dangerously low." "What did you do?" Severus felt ice ran through his veins. Had he become a squib? "Well, me and my mum gave you some of our magic." "Which means? You're part of the family now, and I think you can understand my mom now." Severus blinked. Part of your family? Yup, don't you feel the bond? When Severus reached inside with his magic, the bond was easily found, and it was combined with his vow. When he looked better, he saw that it was a bond like he had with his godson. His first instinct was to be angry, as it felt like he had been forced into another bond, but then he realized none of his vows or previous bonds had given him a family or freedom. This bond wouldn't kill him like the Dark Mark could and would have. He was free to leave if he wanted to. Why don't you get some rest? Dobby will lead you to one of the guest rooms. Get settled, have a chat with my mom, and we will talk later, Harry said before he left the room with his cubs following him, leaving Severus behind with a lot of thinking to do. For the first time he was free to do as he wished. A family bond did not force him to stay like his vow had done, like Dumbledore and the Dark Lord had done. They all had forced him on a path and to do things he never wanted to do. He was truly free. Harry was working on his reading and writing skills with Quilly. The house elf had done an amazing job with all the mail that had been sent to him over the years. She had sorted through most of the mail and was now working on sending back and replay, even if it was years overdue. The drawings children had sent him were hung up on the walls. The stuffed animals and children toys he would never play with were sent to the hospitals for the sick children. He crossed his last T, as that was the letter he was working on when he put his quill down. Luna, isn't this really boring for you? Luna looked up, and with a smile she finished her drawing of Quilly. No, you are learning while I draw. Yeah, but still it must be boring to you. You know how to read and write. I'm perfectly entertained, Luna said, smiling, and she pulled out a new piece of parchment and started drawing a green beetle that sat on the window. Your next letter is U from Ukrainian Ironbelly. Harry smiled, picked up his quill and started writing the letter U over and over again. When lunchtime came, they decided to take their sandwiches that had been given by a happy, smiling Dobby outside. It was slowly starting to get colder, but it was still nice enough to eat outside, and while they ate and leaned into the soft fur of the bears, they stayed warm easily. So I've got this new oil, Harry said between a couple of bites, and when I asked Charlie if it was safe to use, he went over the moon how wonderful stuff it was, but that they didn't use it often as it needs a lot of expensive ingredients and has to be brewed by a potions master. But someone sent me a couple of barrels, and I thought it would be nice to spoil my mum a bit. Luna smiled and divided her apple into pieces for the bears and smiled. That would be a wonderful experience, and I think it would make a great article for the Quibbler. When they had finished their sandwiches and shared the fruits between themselves and the bears, they got up to find Ruby, who was more than happy to get some pampering. Ruby laid down at the wash and grooming part of the barn and was more than happy to let the two children frolic around her. In no time the room was turned into a water ballet. Everything was soaking wet, but in the end Ruby had never been so clean in her whole life. After Harry and Luna had washed and dried the huge dragon with a lot of laughter and splashing, they gently started rubbing the oil into the scales, and Ruby closed her eyes in satisfaction and made a purring sound, but if anyone dared to try and compare, her aunt survive. Luna, don't get me wrong, but do you and your dad not have a home? You and your dad have been here forever, Harry asked, a little hesitant while he and Luna worked on one of Ruby's front paws. Luna sighs sadly. We do have a home. Last year my mom died in an accident. I was there, but there was nothing I could do. Ever since that accident, home doesn't feel like home. It's just a house now, a house filled with memories, and Daddy only sees the sad ones when we are at the house. I think I can count the days I've slept there since the accident on one hand. Oh, Harry isn't sure what to say. Do you miss your home? I miss what it used to be. Now it's just an empty shell of a house. Perhaps one day it will be a home again, but I don't think that Daddy and I will return soon. Perhaps when the time comes for me to go to Hogwarts. Are you going to Hogwarts? Harry asked, surprised and a little sad. Luna looked up at him and smiled. Perhaps. The Nargles are undecided at the moment. Harry smiled. He still wasn't sure what Nargles of Raxperts were, for that matter. All he knew was that if the Nargles told Luna something, it was true. As long as your dad is exploring the Dragon Reserve, you are more than welcome to come over as much as you want. Thanks. Harry smiled, and happily in each other's company they pampered and spoiled the huge dragon, who was more than willing to oblige the two children, as it was such a hardship to get pampered for hours on end. Severus Snape was wandering through the house, even though the house elf had told him to rest, with a stern look. He was impressed with the immense building that could easily fit multiple dragons, but still felt cozy and like a real home. Not that he had much experience with homes. How was he supposed to rest or sleep after everything that had happened? Now that his dark mark had been removed, he could feel the difference. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted, and that was not all of it. For the first time since he could remember, he could feel his magic buzzing underneath his skin. Ready to be used, his fingers tingled as if he was brewing a new invention. It was now that he truly realized what he had lost when he had become a servant of the Dark Lord. He had been so young. He had lost his mother at the hands of his abusive and alcoholic father. In that same year he had lost his only friend, and his life had become so dark and hopeless, and there in the dark had the Dark Lord been waiting for him, telling him how smart and wonderful he was, that he was special and wanted forever to be cherished as the potions master of the Dark Lord. Severus sneered at himself as he thought back. Oh, how stupid, young and naive he had been. How he had not seen that he had been a fly, trapped in the web, in the Dark Lord's carefully spun web. He had wanted change for the wizarding world, change the Dark Lord had promised. The first change would be that no child would ever grow up in an abusive home or in the Muggle world. The second thing was taking in Muggle-born children much younger, as the change at 11 was just too big. The children needed to be taught at a young age so they could grow with their magic like the pureblood children could. And thirdly, they would bring back their traditions, holidays and rituals, as they all had seemed to be forgotten in favor of the Muggleborns. While they were important, as no one would ever want Lady Magic to think they took her gift for granted and take it away from them. Severus sighs as he walks back to the room that had been appointed to him. What in Merlin's name was he going to do? He was finally free to follow his childhood dream and open a small potion shop while inventing new potions. But could he leave a child behind that had given him his freedom, the child that belonged to his once best friend? He slumped down in one of the lazy chairs in front of the fireplace, and on the side table next to him appeared a bottle of fire whiskey and a glass. He wasn't sure what to think of the fact that the house elf could provide him with the so much needed alcohol, while the only other person that lived in the house was an underage child. As he poured himself a drink, he decided that that would be a question for another day. Asterisk 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 chapter endnotes. At the moment I'm working on finishing my other story, the first part of The Children of Mirabilis, Harry Potter and a Whole New Tale, and this story has to wait for a little bit so my focus can be on one story, as that works better for me. This story will not be abandoned, but I really want to finish my other work, so I make no promises when a new chapter will be posted. Big hug. LadyRava Chapter 8. Chapter notes A. N. This chapter has child abuse in it. It is not too descriptive. Hi everyone. A little note before the start of a new chapter. I love receiving comments on my works. They make my day and give me motivation to write, edit and then upload new chapters for you all. So thank you all for those. Purple heart. But the comments that say how worthless I am and that I shouldn't post my work if it isn't finished, that my works are a waste of their time and I should stop writing altogether, and this is me rephrasing it kindly, but yeah, those comments hurt and they make my pleasure to write disappear faster than snow in the summer sun. So just a reminder to everyone that I am human and have feelings. I write to escape life and hopefully give some joy to others. I have a real life going that is filled with hospital appointments, not only for my husband but also for myself, as my hands are really hurting. Even with heavy pain medication, they just hurt really bad, but I still keep writing for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. So you don't have anything nice to say, please don't say anything at all. If you don't like my works, then don't read it. I don't know if it was one person who left multiple hurtful comments on all my works or a few people all leaving one comment, as it was not commented all at once. But please stop doing stuff like that, as it makes authors stop writing and or sharing their work. Sorry for the long note, but here is a new chapter for you all. Happy ready. Open book. Big hug. LadyRava smiling face with open hands. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 8. Harry stretched himself as he woke in his huge soft bed. He gave Teddy a poke so the bear moved a little so he could slip out of the bed and get to the bathroom, as he really needed to pee. Come on, you lazy bear, move. The big bear let out a groan but moved slightly so he could get out. On his way to the bathroom he shouted, "Good morning, Mum," to the dragon that had been sleeping underneath his balcony. The house was more than big enough for the dragon to easily reside in, and even though she loved her son, she wasn't made to live in a house. She had only slept in the cave when Harry had been ill, or when the harsh winters made it too cold and lonely for Harry in the cave with just his cubs as company. She loved to sleep underneath the moon and to feel the wind wash over her, She was grateful for the goblins as they had given her child a home which easily fit her, but she could easily spend her time outside as she used and loved to do while she watched over all her children that were now living in the valley. Something she had always dreamed of but never thought would happen, as he daughters loved to roam the world, but each and everyone had came home when she had called for them and in the end decided to stay. Harry came back from the bathroom and hugged his mom, who had her head through the balcony doors like she did every morning before he went down to the kitchen for his breakfast. He still loved to cook, but after Dobby had begged him crying on his knees, Harry had quickly agreed to let the elf make the daily meals, and if he wanted he could still bake his cookies or something. At first Harry thought he would have more free time on his hands than he knew what to do with all the help the house elves gave him, but that was a misunderstanding. Sure, he didn't need to check his traps, shees for the winter and stock up, or take care of Bella as Puck and Pip took care of the animals. He still visited her, but she didn't really need him anymore, as the house elves did a more than wonderful job at caring for all the animals in the large barn. So if you would say his daily life had changed, it was an understatement, and even though there were a lot of things he didn't need to do, there were a lot of things on his chore list even though the chores had changed. Harry gave the last piece of his banana to Tiny when Charlie came into the kitchen, who had been let inside by Dobby. "Good morning," Harry said as he saw the man. "Everything all right?" Charlie nodded and thanked Dobby, who set a cup of coffee in front of him. "Yeah, just came to check up on you with it being Halloween last night." Harry looked confused while he scratched Tiny's head. "Well, last night was the anniversary of your parents' death." "Oh, yeah, I forgot about that, to be honest," Harry said while feeling a little guilty. "Ah, well, it doesn't really matter," Charlie said quickly, and when he saw the look on Harry's face he quickly decided to change the subject. "So apparently it's a good thing you didn't go to Hogwarts." "Huh, how so?" Harry asked, confused. "Last night a mountain troll got into the castle and attacked and injured multiple students, including my little brother," Charlie said, a little grim. Harry's eyes widened. He had a run-in with the mountain troll once, and he had been more than happy to run away and let his mother handle it while he got to safety. "Is your brother all right?" Charlie smiled, touched by the genuine concern. "Yeah, he broke his arm, and besides a couple of scrapes and bruises, he's all right. They fixed him up at the hospital wing, same as the other students." "That's good to hear." "Yeah, but Mom is beyond angry and took all of my siblings home as she is pressing charges. The wards that surround Hogwarts should have prevented the troll from entering or even getting close. Only the headmaster could have changed those wards to allow the troll to enter." "Dumbledore let a troll loose inside Hogwarts?" Charlie shook his head. "Nope, but he allowed it to happen. He tried to sweep it under the rug, but Mom wasn't having it and went to the ministry to Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, who took the complaints very seriously, and the headmaster and Hogwarts are now even further under investigation." He and Hogwarts were already under investigation, but Dumbledore has managed to hide things like how badly the wards are. "Wow," Harry said, not sure what to say. UHU and Hogwarts was already having a hard time with 2 professors leaving just at the start of the year. How is Snape doing anyway? Harry shrugged. "I'm not sure, he doesn't say much. He asked if he could stay while he figured things out, so I told him he could use the rooms he stays in. He found the library and potions lab all by himself. Dobby gives him his meals in his room, and he tells me that Severus is mostly writing while doing some kind of research." "But he isn't bothering you?" Charlie asked, concerned. "No, not at all. You wouldn't know he was here if you didn't know it already. As far as I can tell, he had a hard life and is finally free to do what makes him happy. I hope he finds what it is that makes him happy." "I don't think he really knows," Harry said thoughtfully. "Well, if he becomes a bother, just let me know. I'm just here to let you know that we are taking the cast of the wing of the Chinese Firebolt. The little guy is healing great, and we think with some therapy he will fly again." Harry smiled happily. "I will be there to explain everything to him and his mom." "Good," Charlie said with a smile. Harry had been there every step of the way to explain things to the dragon and her wounded young. He had made sure the little dragon stayed off the cast around his wing and didn't move it too much. It had been a delicate process, but it had saved the little dragon's wing. "I will see you this afternoon." "Definitely." "Well, thanks for the coffee, I really have to go," Charlie said as he stood up. Harry waved him goodbye, and with Tiny at his side he started his morning rounds at the barn. As Harry adjusted to his life in his new home, things outside the valley had turned upside down. With the help of Lucius Malfoy, Arthur Weasley had taken his place at the Wizengamot and the first changes were taking place. During the holidays, the Goblins would take care of the wards and make sure that they were up to date so that a troll entering the school could never happen again. The International Confederation of Wizards had sent multiple people over to make sure that the curriculum was up to the standards, including its teachers. In other words, teachers like Professor Binns had no business teaching their children. A team had been set up with Cursebreakers from Gringotts, a squad of Aurors and 2 Unspeakables from the Department of Mysteries to make sure that nothing was in the school that could seriously harm anyone, and their biggest job was going through the room of requirement. Lucius Malfoy had shocked their world when he showed his true colors. Oh, he wasn't suddenly a changed man, but he wasn't the muggle-hating bigot he used to be, and with Arthur Weasley at his side agreeing with his plans and propositions had made a lot of people think about what the two lords were doing. Some agreed and some not. When Molly Weasley had pulled her children out of Hogwarts, it had been the start of many parents taking their children back home. If Molly thought it wasn't safe, something had to be really wrong, as everyone knew how much she and her family had supported Dumbledore. When it was announced in the Daily Prophet that Molly Weasley and Narcissa Malfoy had started a temporary school with a couple of other mothers to make sure that their children got the education they needed and deserved, while the Ministry and ICW made sure that Hogwarts was brought back to her former glory as the best school in the wizarding world. At first, people had been hesitant to send their children to this new temporary school, but when the few children that went to this school came back home and told their friends and family how much they learned and enjoyed it, others soon followed. Narcissa Malfoy rubbed her eyes tiredly while she went through all the paperwork on her desk. When she looked up, she saw that Molly Weasley wasn't faring any better. She sighs. "Molly, what do you think about leaving this for the morning and let's see how our children and husbands are doing?" Molly finished the words she had been writing and put her quill down and looked at all the work they still had to do, but they had been working on it for hours and it was getting late. Not only that, she really missed her children as she came home late most nights and the youngest were already in bed. "I think you had the right idea," she said, smiling. Both women put their things away and closed off the office and their school. It was just a small building in Diagon Alley, but it had multiple floors and rooms and it became a little cramped, but it was all temporary. "I heard they are looking for a few people to fill up some open teaching spots at Hogwarts. I never thought I would, but I'm thinking about applying for the job to teach household charms and spells," Molly said as they walked towards the apparition point. Narcissa smiled. "It is as if you were reading my mind. They are planning to reinstate the lessons about wizarding culture, etiquette, traditions and such. Lucius thought I would enjoy that and made me send a letter to the board. I love how they are bringing so many classes back. I think a lot of good is coming out of all the bad things that led to these changes." Narcissa nodded. "We all are making sure that no child is ever left behind again. Your husband brought up a few really good points in the Wizengamot that will make Sue return to an abusive household. I know, and I'm really glad with how the future is starting to look." Narcissa smiled in agreement. They wished each other goodbye before they apparate home where their families were waiting for them. Albus Dumbledore couldn't be happier when he left the Ministry building. It had taken him weeks in which he collected all outstanding debts, kindly forced people to return favors he had granted in the past, and if he had to be honest, he had no political power of leverage left, but it had all been worth it. It all came down to the fact that he was the magical guardian of Harry Potter, and he had been ever since the night his parents had died, and that fact had granted him the documents that were now tightly tucked inside his robes. Things finally started to turn around and return back in his favor, and it was all for the greater good, of course. He returned to the apartment that he was renting in Diagon Alley. Not that anyone knew that to change into his newly bought robes. He had them specially for this occasion. They were bright orange with neon-colored lines and light blue laced fringes. In his humble opinion, the robes were the best he ever had, while everyone else who saw them got a little nauseous. With minutes to spare, he apparated to the meeting point. He had sat up earlier, and when he arrived, a small group of people were waiting for him, softly speaking with each other. "Thank you. I'm grateful that you answered my call. We are here today to bring Harry Potter back home." "I'm sorry, what?" Hestia Jones asked. Confused, Albus smiled. "Harry needs to return home, where his family is waiting for him. I know what the papers have been writing, but I'm telling you that isn't true. It has all been a great misunderstanding." He sighs and his blue eyes twinkled as he looked at the group sadly. "Voldemort," Albus waited patiently as shiver went through the group and people paled at hearing the name, "will return. He isn't dead. He is merely gaining his strength while waiting for the best time to strike." young Harry is incredibly vulnerable living alone with just animals. This information can't leave this group, but there are wards surrounding the home of young Harry's relatives. Those wards protect him and not even Voldemort can touch him there. That's why it is so important he returns back home. Sturgis Podmore looked hesitant at Hestia Jones. They had both been in the Order in the war and they had always stood by Albus and his plans, but this felt wrong somehow. Albus, who felt the hesitance of his people, smiled reassuringly. It is all in order as I have the papers signed. His family is waiting for their dearly missed nephew. We all know Albus. He wouldn't do anything if it wasn't necessary, and even though we don't always understand his plans, they always work out. Elphias Dodge said, always having the back of his lifelong friend. It is for the greater good. Daedalus Diggle nodded so hard his hat fell off his head, and he smiled grateful when Mundungus Fletcher picked it up and handed it to him. All right. Everyone grab the portkey and we will take our leave, Albus said, smiling while he held out a large fluffy pink slipper that could have fitted Hagrid, and as everyone put a finger on the fluffy slipper, Albus counted down before they were whisked away. Harry and Luna were washing Hunter for what seemed like the 100th time, and everything was filled with soap bubbles and foam. Harry stroked his wet hair out of his face as he leaned against the bear. I still don't understand why you won't learn. The bear made a sad sound before he rubbed his huge wet face against his, soaking him even more. Luna giggled. Well, we had a rather lazy day. Perhaps he was just scared we got bored. Bored? Harry said, wide-eyed. I don't think I have ever been bored in my life. There is always so much to do, and today I was going to fix some furs as Mom and my sisters still bring back home the animals as they have always done, and I've got some new ones I didn't have before. Luna hummed in understanding. If it wasn't to prevent you from getting bored, then the only logical explanation for why he keeps playing with the skunk is very simple. It's because they're friends. Harry laughed. Yeah, I don't think that skunk agrees with you. Severus the First wouldn't get too close if you don't want to get wet. Harry warned the man when he saw him. I won't, trust me, but I've brewed a shampoo that will relieve your familiar from its horrendous odor. Wow, really? That is amazing. Thank you so much, Harry said happily and incredibly grateful, as he knew from experience that no matter how much he washed Hunter he would still be smelling for some time. It is as much for you as it is for me, Severus answered, as he had found a bear sleeping in his rooms more than once, and no matter how much he tried and warded his rooms, the bears still found their way in, and at this point he was just glad they didn't sleep in his bed. Then suddenly the doors of the barn slammed open and a group of people with Albus Dumbledore as its leader entered, followed by a squadron of really angry goblins. Harry looked in shock at the group of humans, and from the corner of his eyes he saw how Severus had drawn his wand. Luna, he said softly, go get my mom. Luna nodded and slipped away behind an angry, wet, growling bear. What are you doing here? Harry asked, and he crossed his arms in front of him. Everyone who didn't know him would think he looked cute, dripping wet and angry. Anyone that knew him knew that that wasn't the case, and he was as dangerous as the bear beside him. Harry, my boy, Albus Dumbledore said with happily twinkling eyes. It's so good to see you. We are here to bring you home. Harry shook his head in disbelief. I'm home. Dumbledore pulled some documents out of his robes with a grand gesture. You see, these documents say that you belong with your relatives who miss you dearly. Harry tried to hide his shock. Dumbledore couldn't be truly saying what he was hearing. He shot a panicked look at Severus and held Hunter close. Those documents mean nothing, as you well know. You have no power here, Dumbledore, Severus said as he stepped out of the shadows that had been hiding him until now. Severus, my boy, Dumbledore said happily, but Harry saw that the usual twinkle was missing in his eyes, and he saw how other members of the group pulled out their wands, and that gesture was followed by the goblins who pulled out their daggers, axes and other weapons. The tension rose and was almost touchable. Please leave. You are not welcome here, and I suggest you walk out while you can, as I can hear my mother approaching. Everyone went silent for a moment as they all could hear the wings of a huge dragon flying closer and closer. Then a lot of things happened all at once. Dumbledore threw something at Harry while multiple spells were fired off at Severus. Severus of course deflected each and every spell, but when he looked up he had no time to shoot a spell at the object before it hit Harry, who looked up in shock before the portkey was activated and he was gone. The second the bear felt how the hand of the boy he loved so much were ripped from him, pulling out his hair, he turned to look at the person who was to blame, and all his years of hunting small prey finally paid off. 3 seconds after Harry had disappeared, Albus was tackled by a huge angry, wet bear who ripped the arm with his wand off and with just a few chews swallowed it whole with wand and all. The now angry, wet and bloodied bear kept standing over the shivering, crying and bleeding man, loudly roaring. It was 5 seconds after Harry had disappeared when the group of goblins and Severus had disarmed each and every member of the group that had followed Dumbledore to Romania. 6 seconds after Harry had disappeared, Severus had to explain to a really angry mother who also was a dragon that her child had no idea where he'd been sent to. Harry landed painfully after the portkey had dropped him off. He blinked and scrambled to his feet as he looked around and slowly realized where he was, and his blood turned into ice in his veins. So, freak, back again. Harry shivered. He had hoped he would never hear that voice again. If it wasn't for you, we would never have been in all the troubles we are in now. Again we are forced to take you in against our will. Harry looked up and saw the angry red face of Vernon Dursley. He started shaking. He was alone for the first time in years. He was dripping wet and he felt cold to the bone. He tried to say something but nothing came out as Vernon ranted and got angrier and angrier. "Well, do you have to say something for yourself?" Vernon asked, and Harry knew his troubles were just starting. When Vernon asked him that, it meant it was the end of his ranting and he was getting ready to use his fists. Harry shook his head and with a sudden burst of adrenaline he sprinted towards the door, his way out of this house, his way out of hell. He turned the doorknob and nothing happened, and he heard Vernon laugh from the living room, and while he slammed and kicked at the door he could hear the heavy footsteps of Vernon Dursley getting closer. He panicked as the door stayed closed. Sweat poured down his already wet face mixed with tears of fear. "You can't leave this house. You can't do your freakishness. Dumbledore has promised us protection from your freakishness," Vernon said, smiling widely. Harry had never been more scared in his life. Where were his cubs? Where was his mom? Where was his family? Please, let me go." Harry finally managed to get out, while his back was against the wall. "No," was all Vernon said before he took a massive swing at Harry which hit him in the stomach, and he could feel how one of his ribs cracked underneath the force. It would be the first of many before he lost consciousness and was tossed into his cupboard, bloodied and broken, just like all those years ago, alone in his cupboard without his family. The chaos that Harry left behind after his disappearance was unimaginable. Albus Dumbledore was taken from underneath an angry bear. They could stop the bleeding, but as his arm and wand was now inside the stomach of a really upset and angry bear, there was nothing more they could do for him, not that they wanted to do more. While the goblins took Dumbledore and his group away, Ruby was already following the bond, the love she held for her son, and followed by a few of her daughters. They flew faster than they had ever done. Ruby had been scared a couple of times in her long life. She had feared for her life or one of her daughters more than once, but never had the fear held her heart in its cold grasp. Never had it felt as if she needed to outfly death himself. While Ruby flew towards her son, Severus Snape felt the same fear grasp his heart. After he was sure that the goblins had the prisoners handled, he apparated back to the reserve, and he thanked the goblins from the bottom of his heart that they had allowed him to apparate outside the valley, where he quickly found Charlie and Bill. While Severus explained what had happened, they made their way to the flow room, where he threw some powder into the fire and called out, "Ministry of Magic." He stepped into the fire and was followed by two grim-looking redheads. Amelia Bones was quickly located and the situation even more quickly explained. With a small team of Aurors they made their way to Privet Drive number 4. They could have gotten there quicker if it hadn't been for Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, who had a hard time understanding the situation and even a harder time accepting what Albus Dumbledore had done before they finally made their way outside the ministry. When they arrived at Privet Drive number 4, the whole street was in chaos, and Amelia Bones immediately called back for reinforcements. 8 huge dragons had landed on the street, and the house that once was number 4 had been crumbled to ashes. Some parts were still burning in front of the skeleton that was once a house, where a woman and a fat child pleading for their lives, while an angry dragon within. Equally angry house elf on its head were seconds away from ending said lives. Severus paled when he saw Amelia Bones take a deep breath, strengthen her shoulders and determinedly walk towards the woman and her fat son, and without giving the dragon a second look she just arrested the woman, and with a snap of her fingers Petunia and Dudley Dursley were taken away by a few Aurors. They both looked relieved to came out of it alive. "Ruby, do you have your son?" Amelia called out towards the dragon, who looked down on her, and Amelia shivered slightly as she had the feeling that the dragon wasn't happy with her and was now deciding what to do. Ruby gave a short nod with her head and Severus stepped forwards. Ruby, does Harry need anything? Is he hurt? Severus hissed, worried. Amelia Bones raised an eyebrow at hearing Parseltongue but said nothing. He is broken and bloodied, like the day I found him. Ruby said, angry, and some flames escaped her mouth. Let me heal him. No, was the short reply. No, you humans have done enough. I will take care of my son as I have done long before you forced yourself into our lives. This has once shown me how horrible humans are. I'm done with humans and I'm taking my son home while my daughters erase this horrible place, and perhaps out of its ashes some beauty will rise. With that the huge dragon flew away and Severus could see a tiny body on her back, but he couldn't see enough before the dragon flew away and they all had to evacuate the street while the dragons burned it all down, and nothing of Privet Drive was left but ashes. The entire street had been wiped out of existence. Severus gave Amelia an apologetic look before he activated his portkey and left, leaving Amelia to deal with the burning rumbles of a street and the dozens of muggles that had seen the dragons. Chapter end notes. I can't make any promises about the next chapter update. Cold sweat smile. Chapter 9 chapter notes. Thank you all for the wonderful comments. I have read and enjoyed them all. They really make my day. Purple heart. I haven't responded as I usually do and I'm sorry for that. My hands just suck and when they work, I use them to write a new chapter instead of answering comments. I love the comments you all leave behind. Don't think I don't because I haven't responded. Thank you all for reading and supporting me. Smiling face with open hands. Happy reading Everone open book big hug. LadyRava smiling face with open hands. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter 9. Ruby's flight back towards the valley was quick while Dobby made sure that the wounded boy stayed on her back. The house elf had been left behind but soon got up to date by Luna. The house elf had just popped on the head of the flying dragon to get his master back. It had been Ruby who had torn Vernon Dursley to shreds, but it had been Dobby's dagger that the small elf had plunged into his heart that had ended the man's life before he was torn into pieces. Instead of the house, Ruby flew back to the cave, the place where it had started, the place they had called home for so many years. This was the place they had become a family. Dobby quickly popped away to get some furs and the cubs who were already on their way towards the cave. Thanks to Luna who had finished washing Hunter with the shampoo Severus had given. While they all went to get Harry, did the bear not smell? Inside the cave was a soft bed made of the furs Dobby had brought and Harry was gently put down. He moaned as the wounds on his back hurt as he lay on them. They carefully shifted him on his side where it would hurt less. While the cubs curled around the tiny body, Ruby started her healing magic, and after hours of pouring magic and healing, all the broken bones were mended, the cuts, scrapes and bruises were healed. The internal damage that would healed, and all they have to do now was wait until he woke up, which could take a couple of days. Please, let me in. Severus begged, but no matter what he did or used to bribe the bears, they wouldn't let him in, and this has been going on for almost 2 days. 2 days in which he had barely slept and he hadn't left the entrance of the cave in the hope that he would be let in. He had thought that at some point the dragon would leave the cave so he could talk to her and convince her to let him see Harry so he could heal him, give him potions or whatever else he might need, but only the bears got out of the cave in shifts to make sure nobody got too close. Any changes? Charlie asked as he walked towards the small campsite Savidus had set up. No. Charlie nodded. He was used to the short replies from the man by now. Well, I've got you some supplies. He put the bag before he sat down and sighs while he looked at the entrance that had been closed by some magic Ruby had done. I really hope they're all right in there. When Severus didn't answer and started to put the supplies away, Charlie stood up and said his goodbye to the man before he started to make his way back. Severus almost dropped the products he had been putting away when Charlie left. He couldn't do this anymore. This was killing him slowly. He needed to know how Harry was. The boy that had given him his freedom. The boy that didn't hesitate to give him a room to stay in as long as he wanted. The boy that made sure his favorite coffee was served. The boy that had adopted him in his strange but loving family. Please, Ruby, you don't have to let me in, but please let me know he is all right. He had tried this so many times in the last 2 days that he was almost startled when the soft and tired answer came back. He is alive. I will return him home when he is ready. Thank you. Severus said, relieved. It felt as if he could finally breathe again. He pulled out his wand and sent off a Patronus to Charlie and Amelia Bones to let them both know that Harry was alive and healing. For the first time in a long time Severus sat down and closed his eyes. He still wasn't ready to leave or get to bed, but he could close his eyes for a little while, finally get some rest. Harry woke up screaming, and as he tried to sit up the pain shot through him and he fell back down into the softness of Tiny's fur. "Easy, little hatchling. You are safe, you are home, you are with me and your cubs." Ruby kept repeating those words until Harry finally calmed down and became aware of his surroundings. He let out a shuddered breath. "I'm really home." He reached out to touch his mom, and she gently laid her head next to him. With one hand on her nose and the other stroking the soft fur of Tiny, he asked, "What happened?" "They took you away and I found you and took you back home where you belong. You were hurt badly and it will be a while before the pain truly fades." "I know," Harry sighs sadly. "I just feel horrible. I didn't know they could just throw something at me and I would be, poof, gone. They took me from my home." Harry started crying, and it didn't make much sense anymore. All the fear, pain and terror he had felt poured all out of him. All the memories he had forgotten about his life with the Dursleys had come back. It was much later, when his tears had dried, that Dobby handed him a mug filled with steaming hot chocolate milk. "Dobby is really, really glad that Master Harry is back home. Dobby has made sure with Dragon Mother that the fat whale got his punishment." The elf sounded calm, but his green eyes got a dangerous gleam. "What did you do?" Harry asked tiredly as he enjoyed the taste of hot chocolate milk. "Nothing Master needs to worry about now. All Master Harry needs to know is that it is all taken care of, and Dobby needs a new dagger." "What happened to your old one?" "Dobby took down a whale before Dragon Mother shredded it to pieces." The little elf looked incredibly proud of himself that Harry just smiled and drank his chocolate milk. As he sat there in the warmth of his cubs while he leaned against his mother, he wasn't sure what to think about it all. He didn't like the thought that they had killed for him, even though it warmed his heart that he had a real family willing to fight and kill for him. And that was now the problem: they had killed for him, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. It was as if his mother was reading his mind when she said, "What would you have done if it had been me or your cubs who had been hurt?" Harry didn't really need to think about that. "I think we needed a lot more daggers if that would happen." "Exactly. Now rest, lil hatchling, and tomorrow you will sleep in your bed again." I don't want to go home. What if somebody else is trying to take me? What if you or the cubs or Severus or Dobby or Charlie or Luna get hurt? What if?" "Hush now, we will figure it out. For now, rest." It didn't really take much convincing from his mother to lay down and cuddle with Tiny. He was tired and his body hurt, and he knew his dreams would be haunted by everything that had happened. Albus Dumbledore was having everything but a good time in the goblin cells deep underground. He was now wearing gray pants and a shirt instead of his bright colorful robes he loved so much. He had been in solitude ever since they had bandaged what was left of his arm and made sure he wouldn't die of his injuries. He had called out to Fox so his beloved familiar could help him escape, and to his joy the magnificent bird had answered his call. He flamed into his cell, but before Albus could command him, the sad and disapproving look Fox gave him silenced the old man. "Fox?" Albus said hopefully. Fox shook his bright red feathers, and the trill that sounded through the cell was so sad that Albus could have sworn that Dementors had entered his cell. And then he felt the familiar bond break into 1,000 pieces, and Albus fell onto his knees, desperately begging Fox not to leave him. The bird gave one last thrill which made Albus burst out in tears before the phoenix flamed away, leaving Albus alone and hurt in his cell, just like he had done with Harry. Charges to escape custody while using a familiar bond, which is illegal, as you well know, will be added to the charges, came the snarling voice of a goblin from behind his cell. Albus Dumbledore was not having a good time. Harry woke up in his own bed when he heard voices outside his room. It had taken him a little bit longer to leave the cave, but now he was glad he did, as his bed was wonderful. He stroked Tiny's head while he listened to what was going on outside. "I don't care what they want," Severus snarled, and Harry wondered why the man was so angry. The boy broke his spine in multiple places. Without Ruby's magic he would never be able to walk again, and that is if he would have survived. Harry couldn't hear the reply, but Severus' voice became ice cold. "You will see, Minister, that boy is your king even if he isn't officially crowned. You know that as well as I do. If you force him to do this you will lose every favor you ever had with him. I suggest you leave and think long and hard about the path you want to follow and the people that deserve your support, as I can assure you Albus Dumbledore does not." The next part Harry couldn't follow as Dobby brought him something to eat, and when the happy house elf left, the conversation outside his doors had been finished. When the door opened he thought that it was Severus, but instead Luna skipped in, followed by Hunter, Shadow and Teddy. The three bears and girl all climbed onto his bed without waiting for an invention. They happily settled themselves. "How are you?" Luna asked while she fluffed up Shadow as if he was a pillow, and it wasn't as if he really needed it. Harry shrugged. He hated that question, and he got it more than a dozen times a day. "I'm fine. Still a little sore, but it's getting that Mom and Severus won't let me out of bed. If I was still living in my cave I wouldn't have a choice than to take care of everything." Luna nodded in understanding and smiled. "Yeah, but you aren't living in the cave anymore. You don't have to do everything by yourself. Or would you have wanted to wash Hunter all by yourself?" Again, as he visited his friend the skunk just before breakfast. Again, "Yeah. I tried to explain to him that skunks don't like bears, and no matter how hard he tried he would never be friends with the skunk, but he wouldn't believe me, and it had again a smelly result. We are really lucky to have a potion master like Severus around, otherwise we were forced to the Muggle way." "The Muggle way? UHU. Yeah, they bathe dogs in tomato ketchup when they get sprayed by a skunk. It helps with the smell." "Okay," Harry said while he shook his head. He was glad they didn't have to do that, as he really didn't want to know the mess it would make when they bathed a bear in tomato ketchup. There was a soft knock on the door. Harry told them to come in, and King Ragnuk walked inside. When Luna tried to scramble to her feet, King Ragnuk raised his hand. "Please stay seated, no need for formalities." Luna gave a polite nod with her head before she leaned back against Shadow. "Young Dragon King, I hope your recovery is going well," the Goblin King asked, concerned. Harry nodded. "Yes, everything is healed perfectly. All I need is some rest and everything will be fine." King Ragnuk smiled. "That I really good to hear. The reason why I'm here is that I'm bearing gifts. Bill told us about your fears about being taken against your will, and even though we updated the wards we understand your concerns, so I had the master jewelers work on this piece for you." He pulled out a golden chain that looked fairly simple and plain, but when Harry took it, the chain immediately wrapped itself around his wrist all the way up around his arm and neck. Harry looked a little bit shocked at King Ragnuk. "This is a protection chain. It cannot be removed, only by your and mine hands together. It will protect you from all kinds of potions and poisons, spells, curses and unwilling apparition or portkeys. Further protections can be easily added, and when you are ever in a situation you can use the activation phrase and it will bring you back to safety." "Wow, that is truly amazing. I don't know how to repay such a gift." King Ragnuk smiled. "You can pay us back by growing up and becoming king someday, but until that day, just stay safe." "Thank you so much. Do not mention it." And as our master jewelers were working on your protection chain in the fresh air, they couldn't help themselves and made one for each of your cubs and mother. Harry could feel his mouth almost drop to the floor when he saw how King Ragnuk put on each of his cubs a golden chain that wrapped itself around their paws, and through their thick fur it left only a golden twinkle behind. "Thank you so much. Please come for dinner when I am allowed out of bed again, and ask the jewelers if they want to come too." King Ragnuk smiled. "That offer is happily taken, as our last dinner here was more than delicious." Harry blushed a little at the praise, but was happy that his invitation was accepted. It was the least he could do, or that was his thoughts. He tried to hide a yawn, but it was still noticed. "We will see each other when you are fully healed and rested. Take care of yourself, young Dragon King." King Ragnuk left, and Harry admired the golden chain around his cubs. It felt as if a burden he didn't know he had carried with him had been lifted from his shoulders. Not only was he safe, but his cubs and mother got the same protection. It was truly amazing. "All right. I know they are lovely, but you need to get some sleep," Luna said with a giggle when Harry almost fell asleep sitting up admiring the chain around Tiny's paw. He laid down and soon fell asleep while Luna simply pulled out a book and started reading while humming softly. Ever since his return back home, Luna had stayed with him, and even though he thought it to be a little awkward at first, he soon was more than happy to have her with him, as she had woken him up from his nightmares more than once and told him stories until he fell asleep again. Severus was brewing another box of shampoo for Hunter. He really needed to find that skunk and deport it to the other side of the world, as it was starting to get ridiculous how many times a day that bear got sprayed. Today the teller stood at 8 and the evening had just started. And after he was done brewing, he had a conversation with Harry he really didn't want to have. The goblins were holding Dumbledore and his merry band of people prisoner, which officially goes against the Accords, but as they were doing it for the Dragon King, they got away with the for now. If Harry wasn't willing to truly take up his crown, Dumbledore could walk free, but if Harry was willing to take his crown and become their king, he had to be judge, jury, and if needed executioner, and that was a really heavy burden to put on an 11-year-old, especially an traumatized 11-year-old. That whole conversation had made him brew, so he got some extra time, but no matter how much he prolonged the inevitable, he still needed to go upstairs and have to speak with the boy. With a sigh, he bottled the last bit and cleaned up his cauldron and equipment. He gave a soft knock on the door. He heard Harry say, "Enter." He walked inside and saw how Harry and Luna were sharing pieces of fruit with the bears. "Good evening. I hoped you had a moment to talk." Harry smiled, wiped his hands clean on a towel before he said, "Sure. What do you want to talk about?" "Do you want me to leave?" Luna asked. Severus shook his head. "I don't mind you staying, it is up to Harry." Harry shrugged. "We will probably talk about it later, so this will only save us time." Severus nodded and started to explain, where he first thought it would take him a while to explain, but he was done very quickly. Harry stayed silent for a couple of minutes before he finally said, "So if I understand it correctly, I need to become king and hold a real trial, otherwise Dumbledore walks free?" Severus nodded. "Yes, and being king isn't an easy task." "Yeah, I talked with Charlie, King Ragnarok, and my mom about it, and it was really something I was thinking about doing when I'm an adult and have learned enough to rule." Now he was just an 11-year-old boy that barely knew how to read. "Yes, but the problem is you don't have the time to grow up. If your coronation isn't held in 2 weeks and the trial no less a day later, Dumbledore and his people will be free. I know multiple people like Arthur Weasley tried to change things for you at the Wizengamot. They wanted to wait until you were at least 17, but more than a few people wouldn't hear about it. And if you decide not to become king, more than a few people already have announced that the lands you have given to the goblins have to be taken back, as only the king can give those lands away." Severus sighs. He knew it was a lot. "I'm sorry." "Well, it looks like I do not have much choice," Harry said, even though he looked everything but happy about the whole situation. "You always have a choice. The goblins will return to Gringotts for a few years and we will find another way to charge Dumbledore." Harry shook his head. "You know as well as I do that that is not how it works. I'm not going to be the reason that Raina can't raise her baby and other children in the sun and fresh air. I'm not going to be the reason that children who have been playing on the soft green grass are forced back underground, and I'm definitely not going to be the reason Dumbledore walks free." "So what now?" Severus asked. "Now we learn and plan," Luna said, smiling as she took Harry's hand in hers and gave him a reassuring smile. "That you are going TN, you have to do it all by yourself. You have a family and friends who are more than willing to help you." Harry smiled back and looked a little relieved to hear that he didn't have to do it all by himself. He was scared but determined. If he really needed to become king, he would do it even if he didn't like it at all. "Make a list with all the things you think needs to be done or you think you need to learn or know before your coronation. We will go over it and see what is manageable and what tasks we can hand out to others." As Luna said, "You don't have to do it all by yourself." "I can do that," Harry said after a moment. Luna smiled. "I will write it down for you. It will be all right, you will see." "Indeed it will," Severus said while he stood up. "I will make my own list and start talking with a few people. You take some rest before you start working with Luna on your own list." Harry knew that protesting and saying he wasn't tired had any use, so he settled himself for a short nap, and even though he didn't think he could sleep with all the thoughts that swirled through his mind, but he was asleep before Severus had left the room, and he never noticed how Luna started on the list. The days that followed after Harry's decision to become king had resulted in an explosion of busyness broke out. People came with just a quick question before leaving again. The goblins were working on a secret project that was not so secret anymore, just for Harry, who was oblivious to a lot of things that were happening around him. He had retreated to the roof with Tiny and he spoke with his mother for hours on end. Slowly Harry started to get more confident about the whole situation. The worst part had been the choosing of his crown. The Minister of Magic had presented him with a huge, horrendous blinking thing, and he was sure he was never able to hold it up his head, if he could lift his head at all. The second crown had been gifted by a coven of vampires, and even though it was lovely, it was too girly to his taste. The third crown had been gifted by King Ragnarok, and it was a beautiful golden crown. The band were 2 dragons touching with their noses at the front. It was simple and beautiful, and it had been perfect for him. If he thought the choosing of the crown had been a hard task, the clothes he needed to wear for his coronation had been an even harder task. Multiple dressers and stylers had come and shown him their work. He had a hard time not disappointing anyone, but nothing that was shown to him was like him. He wasn't a person that could wear lace or white silk, and the long dress robes most wizards wore looked incredibly uncomfortable. In the end, Dobby had the answer when Harry had a huge breakdown in a side room. The elf hesitantly came forward and told him he should ask the Weasley mother to help him make him a mantle like she had done with her gift, and it was then quickly decided that he would use the fur of the brown bear, the mother of his cubs that had been waiting all those years for the perfect destination, and this was it. Underneath his mantle he would dress in simple black pants, boots and shirt with little golden details. Harry wanted it to be as simple as they let him be. Just because he became king didn't mean he wasn't just Harry. Harry also had decided that he wouldn't be standing alone, and the whole ordeal would be a lot better with his friends and family, so Severus, Charlie and Bill had all new robes for the ceremony. Gift cards had been sent out to Arthur and Molly and the other Weasley children so they could choose new outfits for the ceremony, as he really wanted them to stand in front of all the people he didn't know, and he wasn't going to be the only one to be forced to fit outfit after outfit. "Good morning," Harry said, yawning, and he stretched himself. Luna smiled. She had been awake for a little bit and had been brushing some knots out of Shadow's fur with her fingers while happily humming. "Morning, you slept much better than last night." Harry nodded in agreement. "Yeah, just one bad dream and I didn't start throwing around magic. I'm really happy that you are here with me." "I'm always with you," Luna said with a smile. "For now I suggest you take a shower, as Severus will be here soon to pick you up for the rehearsal ceremony." Harry moaned and let himself fall back in his pillow that was as always tiny and closed his eyes again. "I just wish everything would be over. I'm so tired and done with everything. And there are so many people every day, it's exhausting." "I know, soon you will be king and you can kick everyone out and have a holiday, just you and your family. I'm getting up if you promise to join me on that holiday." "Well, it isn't as if I have anything better to do. The crumple-horned snorkik is possibly getting into hibernation, as there never have been any sightings of them during the cold." Harry laughed. "Well, we have to go looking for them in summertime. You should ask my mom if she knows where we can find those crumple-horned snorkik. If anyone would know, it would be your mom. Perhaps she has some advice to get rid of the swarm of rackspurts that are trying to settle themselves in the house, but for now, shower." Harry laughed and scrambled out of bed and took his clothes and went to the bathroom. Today promised to be another really busy day. "Are you sure we can't add more wards?" Severus asked while he looked around the soon-to-be throne room where the coronation and trial would be held. The white marble stones and the high windows alone made it wonderful, but the goblins had taken it a step further and built a beautiful throne for the young Dragon King. "Can you think of anything we have forgotten?" Griphook asked sarcastically as he crossed his arms in front of himself. Severus sighs. "No, and that is the problem. There has to be something we overlooked." Griohook shrugged. "I can't imagine what. This place is even more secure than Gringotts, and that is saying something. Everyone that comes will be checked and double-checked. No intruders will find their way with the use of potions, charms or other means. It's warded against animagi and a few hundred other things. Give my gratitude to King Ragnarok. Your people did a wonderful job in the short time you had." Severus said he didn't want to accidentally offend the goblins just because he had a nagging feeling inside his stomach and he wasn't sure what it was trying to tell him. Griphook gave a sharp nod before he took off, leaving Severus alone, if not for long, as his place was taken by Charlie. "Severus, do you have a moment?" Charlie asked, and the man gave a nod in acknowledgement. "Great, so the problem is the goblins have made the cubs and Ruby some kind of armor for tonight. They wanted to surprise Harry and they asked me if I could do that. And now you want me to distract Harry so you can dress up the bears and keep them hidden until the ceremony," Severus said, and he pinched the bridge of his nose. He was going to have a hard time explaining that to Harry, as he always had at least one bear at his side, and with everything that was going on he needed the comfort and support the bears gave him. "You have 5 minutes to dress up Tiny. The other bears will be sent over to you one at a time." Charlie looked relieved. "Thanks, I will bring Tiny to you as soon as I'm done." "Good," Severus said before he walked away. He needed to check up his potions again, as he was sure Harry needed a calming draft in the next few hours, and he liked his portions fresh, and the calming drafts he had in stock were already a few days old. That he needed a quick brew to calm his own nerves went unsaid. Dobby was whistling while he dressed himself in the dragonhide outfit Harry had given him. Dragonhide was one of the most expensive materials to make clothing from, but that was because it was very difficult to find enough undamaged shed skin the dragon left behind, but since Harry helps trough their shedding, he had whole pieces of skin that were worth more gold than he could spend in a dozen lifetimes, so of course he had gifted his house elf with multiple outfits, like everybody would do, or so Harry thought. Dobby put his new dagger that had been gifted by King Ragnarok himself to protect his king's shed on his belt. He felt proud of himself. He was going to stand by his master while he got crowned to be king, and as far as Dobby knew, no elf had ever done so. He was the first house elf in so many things, and Dobby felt proud of himself, but he had done it out of love for the boy that treated him as family and not as a slave as he was used to his whole life. With one last look in the mirror, he went to his king so that Charlie could dress up the bears. Breath, come on, smell the flowers and then blow out the candles, Severus said gently as he tried to calm down the soon-to-be king. I can't do this, Harry said through his panic, and, I don't, circa. Care, about the s. Sup. Surprise, please bring back, my cubs. Severus looked down at the child in front of him, and he didn't know for how many times he had this thought. He wondered why they were doing this to a child. Dobby is getting them. I'm sorry, Harry. Harry just shook his head. He was so done with everything. He was tired and his back still hurt. Simply put, they were asking too much of him. When the door opened and the bears walked in, Harry almost flew through the room in order to hug them and get the comfort he so much needed. As he pushed his tear-stained face into the soft fur, he didn't even notice the golden armor they were wearing and took a deep breath while inhaling the calming scent of his cubs, and he could breathe again. He ignored the voices in the room as he hugged his cubs. He could do this. He was going to do this, he said to himself. He looked up when he smelled hot chocolate and saw Dobby. He gave a watery smile when the elf handed him the steaming mug. You look wonderful, Dobby. The elf smiled. Thank you, sir, and everything is going to be all right, Dobby promises. Harry wrapped his hand around the mug and crossed-legged he drank it inside his pile of bears where nothing could reach him. Just a few more minutes before he had to face his future and become king. These were the last moments where he was just Harry. All right, I'm ready. Severus looked up and saw the small boy, and he couldn't help himself, but he felt so proud of how he handled this whole mess. He swallowed and he said something he never thought he would say. Know that your parents would have been so proud of you. And after a moment he added, and so am I. Harry gave a little smile. Thank you. All right, I will take my place and you will enter. The doors open and you'll hear the music, just like with the rehearsal. Harry nodded. I know, Teddy, Hunter and Shadow will go first, then me and Tiny. With one last look, Severus left the room, and he felt guilty for leaving the boy alone, but that was just how it was, and it wouldn't be for long, as his arrival was the sign to get the coronation started. He walked to the front of the large hall that was now filled with more than 10,000 people from all over the world. Humans, vampires, Vila, centaurs, creatures, and the list went on. This was the magical world welcoming their king. He took his place next to Ruby and hissed a short reassurance, and the music started playing, and then the doors opened and Severus and everyone in the attendance saw their new king. With his head held high, his followed 3 of his cubs who looked even more magical in their goblin-made armor. With his hand on Tiny's head, he slowly walked towards the podium with his throne. Harry tried to hide his fear when everyone turned their head and looked at him, and he was in shock. Sure, he was told there would be people coming to his coronation, but what he saw here must have been the entire magical world, as there could not be another explanation for this many people. He hadn't known there were this people on Earth. If it hadn't been for Tiny, he hadn't moved from his spot, frozen in shock, but his hand that had turned white from the grip he had on her fur, but the bear slowly followed her brothers. Harry took a deep breath, but it felt as if there was no oxygen in the air, and as they moved forwards through the aisles of whispering people, Harry wanted nothing more than to turn around and run. It felt as if it had taken forever to reach the front of the room with a podium and his new throne, not that he really noticed it. As he waited for a few ministers to hold their speech, he looked at all the people and he felt so out of place, as if it was all some strange dream and he would wake up soon in his cave, ready to milk Bella, check on his traps and make his breakfast above a fire. Then came the moment he had feared for. He needed to step forward and recite his oath in Latin. He had practiced it more than 100th times, as he had kept stumbling over the strange words, but he had kept practicing with Luna until he could dream the words. He took a deep breath and with his hand still in Tiny's fur he faced all those people. Harry paled. What was he supposed to say? Why were the words gone from his mind? Just a few seconds ago he knew them perfectly, so why were they gone from his mind? He panicked a little. Had someone hexed him? He felt his heart beating inside his chest and the beating became so fast it was starting to hurt. Whispers started to come from the crowd and the longer Harry stayed silent the louder the whispers became. It's just a little boy. How is that supposed to be our king? He looked pretty regular. Are you sure he isn't a muggle? He doesn't have a wand. He must be a retard. Look at him, he isn't saying a word. Children aren't meant to be king. I knew it, this is all a hoax. Harry started to shiver. They didn't even try to whisper anymore and he didn't know what to say while the people started screaming horrible things at him. Severus had tried to silence the crowd with his usual glares but it hadn't worked as no one was watching him. The goblins were pulling out their weapons and he knew things could turn bad quickly, and the horrible feeling he had inside his stomach that day only intensified. It was when a tomato was thrown at the stage that multiple things happened at the same time. As the tomato flew through the air, Severus, Charlie, Bill and multiple other people had pulled out their wands to deflect the thrown piece of fruit, not that it was necessary as the wards the goblin had placed in the hall came into action and the tomato disappeared. There was a second of ear-deafening silence before Ruby roared loud and angry, soon followed by the bears and Severus and the Weasley family shouting. Luna slipped away in the chaos and climbed onto the stage to try and comfort a still frozen Harry. The goblins had found the culprit and were now pulling him by his robes through the front of the hall. People were shouting and all Harry could do was watch it in shock. This was all his fault if he just remembered the words. He felt the tears burn behind his eyes but he refused to cry in front of all those people, and then he felt a small cool hand touch his and he let out his breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Breathe, Harry, remember to smell the flowers and then blow out the candles. Breathe and listen to my voice. Feel my hand in yours. Feel the soft fur of your cub clasped in your hand. Then all chaos broke out as a green light soared through the air straight to the stage where Harry and Luna were standing, and everything seemed to slow down and thousands of eyes followed the curse and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Severus tried to spell multiple objects into its path. The goblins threw their weapons in the hope to deflect the curse, but the green curse passed it all by a hair. Hunter and Dobby had the same thought as the huge bear and small elf threw themselves in front act together into the air, and with a loud bang, they fell unconscious onto the ground while the curse was still on its path. And then seconds before the green curse would hit, a dark mist appeared in front of the two children and bear and the curse dissolved into nothing while the dark fog seemed to fill the entire hall and Severus started looking for Dementors. Mortal beings, and specifically humans, are the worst. A cold voice said, and everyone felt the coldness creep into their bones. You have been given a gift and you have taken it for granted. You all have been wishing for your king, and now that he is here you treat him like that. Why do you have eyes when you don't use them? Perhaps I should remove them and then you are able to see what is in front of you. People started shivering while the voice spoke and the guilt stacked itself up inside their hearts and souls. You don't deserve this child. This child you have forced to become king without giving him the chance to grow up. Perhaps I should return the favor and give your children the same treatment as you did with your king. Then out of nowhere a sort of brave man shouted, "He isn't our king. How could he be? He is too stupid to repeat something as simple as a few words." The voice laughed, and then suddenly in front of Harry and Luna a tall, dark-hooded figure appeared. "You are all so lucky. If my wife would have been here she would have ripped the magic from your souls. It is my master you tried to kill, but it is her child you have spitted and cursed. It is her child you tried to kill." The dark and cold magic swept through the room and slammed them in the face, and suddenly each and every person, being or whatsoever, realized who was standing in front of them. How could they have missed it? People fell to their knees and started pleading. Others started praying to the gods. Silence. It wasn't really shouted, but it was still louder than his previous speech, and the cold magic that came with it felt like a cold winter storm and chilled them even further, and most felt as if they would never be able to warm up again. The dark figure walked towards Ruby and petted her snout. "We meet again, even though I would bet my best scythe on it that my daughters didn't foresee this." The giant dragon closed her eyes for a second to enjoy the pet that had been given before, saying, "You will lose your scythe, Lord Death, as the fates told me a long time ago that we will meet 3 times before you take me to the land beyond." Death laughed again. "Did they? It seems I need to have another chat with my daughters." Severus Snape was the only one who could follow the two, and he barely couldn't believe it. Did Lord Death truly appear? There had been myths and legends about that happening, but those all dated back to the time of Merlin and before. Lord Death turned around, and it seemed as if he looked everybody personally in the eyes. "You all deserve the future that would come if my master didn't become king. Magic would die, and in the end this world would be nothing more than a wasteland. Please, don't hurt them. They are, not all, bad." Even though Harry said it in a whisper, it was heard loud and clear by everyone. Lord Death turned around, and even though Harry couldn't see a face, it felt as if he raised an eyebrow behind his hood. "No." Harry shook his head, and after Luna gave his hand a squeeze, he said a little more confidently and without stuttering this time, "No, some people are good like some people are bad. I know because I met them both, and some just make stupid mistakes." Before Lord Death could answer, light glowed trough through hall, and it was as if a warm summer day had arrived, and suddenly next to Death stood a beautiful woman, as light and warm as Lord Death was cold and dark. She was as tall as he was, and with her golden hair flowing behind her as if a summer breeze was playing with it. It felt as if hope had returned, and a lot of people felt as if they could breathe again. "And that is why you are my child, as your heart is filled with love and kindness. The first thing on your mind is not revenge but forgiveness. Our daughters foresaw you to be a great king, but they never foresaw your kindness and big heart. As I said before, I need a talk with my daughters," Lord Death said as he walked towards the woman. "Hello, love, I thought you didn't want to come." The woman smiled, and with a short laugh she leaned into Lord Death and kissed him, and in that moment it was hard to see where darkness ended and light began, as it looked as if they were one. "How could I not when I heard him stand up to you?" Lord Death laughed, and even though it was a lot colder than the light tinkling laugh of the woman, it wasn't as cold as it was before. It wasn't a laugh that turned their hearts into ice. "I choose my master wisely." "Sure, and it had nothing to do with the fates foreseeing things, or that you oh so wisely decided who became your master last time, and they were more interested in breeding puffkins than in being you master, as your daughters had told you many times." "Well, that is not the point here. Let's see how these people are going to survive after they have refused their new king. Let's see how they thrive when the promised golden age will turn into an age of loss and darkness. Lady Magic took over. These lands will be closed off to everyone but a few who have proven themselves worthy. The goblins will still be welcome as long as they keep giving the kindness and care they have done so far. Here magic will grow and thrive, everywhere and everyone else will feel the pain of taking my gift and child for granted. Karma is a bitch, and I can know it as she is my daughter," Lord Death said, and his laughter filled the entire room, and each and every person besides a few found themselves outside in the middle of nowhere.